being a role model for dealing with a child that's transgender. And that's, that warms my heart, particularly as a Black man.
Particularly as a Black man.
Being a
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the following program. I'm your host, Joe Neerman, aka Good Logic. I don't even get the joke. I don't even get the joke. That ended up in my feed. I don't even get the joke. I don't even get it. Today, we're in an unusual episode of the following program. I really have a different fixation than normal. Instead of going around the world, I actually want to put on my little lawyer hat here. Not that this is a very lawyerly hat, but yeah. I'm putting on my lawyer hat to sort of break down for you all and help better understand this TRO that came down today. And frankly, I think I probably have a bit of a hot take. So, a TRO was issued earlier today, which is designed to put a damper on Operation Return to Sender. This is an operation that Trump has enacted for the purposes of trying to help expedite deportations. Most of you are aware of the fact that I am very much in favor of the notion of deporting everyone who's an illegal criminal, and I am very, very much in favor of deporting every single one. Doesn't matter how long you've been here. Doesn't matter what your race, your color, your gender is. If you're an illegal alien, you don't have a visa, you don't have a green card, you're not a citizen, adios. That's my perspective on this thing, okay? It's really very simple. Go, gay avec, hit the road, Jack. You don't belong here. I don't think anyone will question how from the moment I've been streaming, everyone I've continually been hounding about the ridiculous immigration illegals that are being flooding into our country. I understand that there's a security issue, there's a financial issue, there's a fairness issue, certainly with respect to other people who are legal immigrants trying to come to this country. There's all sorts of bases to recognize that this is a disaster. It's a political issue because so many of them are coming in here and managing to find ways into the ballot booth. So there's a lot of reasons that we have to remedy this situation. That being said, we have a constitution that we have to deal with. And while I genuinely believe that we would be best served if we would say that there are no constitutional rights whatsoever for someone who's an illegal alien, and you've heard me talk about this many times before, that I think philosophically, fundamentally, it doesn't make sense that they should be blessed with the civil liberties that we confer upon American citizens, and we don't confer upon them the same level. There are some civil liberty protections that they have, and I would look at it that the reason that we would afford them due process, which due process the Constitution seems to imply they should have. Due process under the 14th Amendment, it seems to imply that even an illegal alien is entitled to due process. That due process that we give illegal aliens, you want to know why we give them due process? It's not because of our humanity. That's what people will have you say. That's what people would have you believe. Oh, we have to be humane to illegal aliens. No, that's not the reason why. The reason why we need to have due process for illegal aliens is for our own self-protection. Meaning, if you don't have proper due process, bare minimum threshold due process, but some level of due process, you, the individual, are at risk. You're at risk that if you are a citizen, without due process, you can literally throw a hood over someone's head and throw them into the back of a truck and drive them across the border and throw them out of the back of the truck and come back and pick up another truckload. That's what you could do without due process. And if we allow that, Well, what would end up happening is invariably, if you do it enough, you're going to end up accidentally getting some citizens thrown in the back of the truck with them. Maybe a very low percentage. Maybe it'll only be, 0.0001%. But that still would end up being, especially if we're deporting millions of illegal aliens, that still would end up being thousands of American citizens who are wrongfully being abducted without due process. So the reason you have to have due process at a bare minimum threshold is just to know you got the right guy, right? I mean, you have to know you have the right guy. No one wants someone who's an American citizen to be improperly deported. So that bare minimum threshold due process, it makes sense as far as its self-protection, its self-preservation. We're ensuring that the individual is not going to be an American citizen, first and foremost, who's going to be wrongfully deported. And that certainly could happen absent having some bare minimum threshold due process, even for illegal aliens. And I would say that that's pretty much the extent of what we should be affording illegal aliens. That's it. Like, let's ensure that they're not American citizens. If I was writing the Constitution, that to me is where I would draw those lines. I'd be like, okay, I want to have enough due process to be able to properly assess, methodically assess, and, take all due diligence to ensure the status of the individual that we're dealing with here, so that we know exactly what threshold of civil liberties they're entitled to. To me, that makes perfect sense. Is that crazy? Is that wrong? Am I? Well, it seems that probably entitled to some greater levels of civil liberties in the eyes of the Supreme Court, and arguably it's interpreted certain elements of the Constitution, not the. But I'll just turn back to the 14th Amendment, which says they're entitled to some level of due process. And frankly, I think I can interpret the Constitution to be consistent with that theme that I've just spelled out for you as to exactly what sort of levels of protections they're entitled to. Now, keeping all this in mind, what alerted this situation that I'm coming to talk to you about tonight was a post that came courtesy of Margot Cleveland, Professor Margot Cleveland, whereby she writes, and she was retweeting and quote tweeting someone who was responding to her. And I saw this and I was like, oh, here we talk about reason to believe versus probable cause. This sounds like interesting stuff. And I saw this. And she said, folks, I'm seeing a lot of what I believe is misreporting regarding an order entered yesterday by Judge Thurston. Her actual order appears to be consistent with federal law. And I had a lot of questions about this. Stuff I wanted to discuss with you, because it's not stuff I've really covered here on this channel. Bear in mind, please, that I am not a criminal. I've never been a criminal defense attorney. I've never had a single client who's engaged, who I've had to represent in criminal court. And when I'm venturing into this area, it's because I've went to law school and passed the bar, which that is one of the 6 major categories that they cover is criminal law and procedure. And because I've been reading up and or talking to others who have practiced criminal defense law, and I started looking into, because I was mostly curious about this particular issue right here that she raises, which says 8 U.S.C. 1357A2 provides that an immigration officer has the power without a warrant, because this is one of the things that they're always screaming about. Where's your warrant? Where's your warrant? In order to secure a warrant, you have to get some judge to sign off on it. That's 12 million signatures, right? If we're getting rid of 12 million illegal aliens, you need to have a warrant. That's a lot of warrants. It's a lot of warrants. It seems like a great deal of work to get 12 million warrants. You're like, how the hell are we ever getting rid of these people? So, but if you want to do it without a warrant, to arrest an alien who's in his presence or view is entering or attempting to enter the United States in violation of any law. Well, we're not talking about entering. A regulation made in pursuance to law regulating the admission, expulsion, or removal of aliens, or to arrest any alien in the United States. So this is really the part we're focusing on here, to arrest any alien in the United States, if he has reason to believe that the alien so arrested is in the United States in violation of any such law or regulation is likely to escape before warrants can be obtained for his arrest. So you have to have reason to believe that the alien so arrested is in the United States in violation of any such law or regulation and is likely to escape before a warrant can be obtained. Then you can arrest them. So you have to have reason to believe. Now, this leads to the next part here, where all of a sudden, when we see in the order that the judge signed off on, and this is a decision that came out of the Eastern District of California. She wrote, this was Judge Thurston wrote, plaintiff's motion for preliminary injunction is granted as follows. A, Border Patrol is enjoined. I mean, they're stopped from conducting detentive stops. They're prohibited from conducting detentive stops, meaning stops that are put in the hold, that in this district, which these are key words, and I want you to know something. I have some respect for this judge just reading this first sentence, because she specifically limits her order to the Eastern District of California. So while she is putting an injunction on the operation, and the name of the operation is Operation Return to Sender, which I have to tell you first and foremost is a pretty bad A name. I love that name. I've got my little ones here. Yeah, so that's a pretty good name. That's a pretty good name, Operation Return to Sender. And even though I don't really like the idea of forestalling our efforts to deport illegal aliens, I have respect for the fact that this judge, at the very least, seems to understand concepts of venue and jurisdiction and says, I'm going to pass this not on a nationwide basis. These are the rules for operating in the Eastern District of California. This is areas like Fresno. I saw a list of the areas that it covers. Fresno is definitely one of them. So in the Eastern District of California, I mean this sincerely, okay? While I probably disagree with this judge on a whole host of things, I do want to tip my cap to her and say, I appreciate that you did not enter a nationwide injunction, but restricted the scope of your injunction specifically to the Eastern District of California. So Border Patrol is enjoined from conducting detentive stops in this district unless pre-stop, before you stop them, the detaining agent has a reasonable suspicion that the person to be stopped is a non-citizen who's present within the United States in violation of U.S. immigration law, as required by the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution, which is Terry v. Ohio. You need to have reasonable suspicion. Border Patrol is enjoined from effecting warrantless arrests in this district unless pre-arrest the arresting agent has probable cause to believe that the non-citizen being arrested is likely to escape before a warrant can be obtained as required by 8 U.S.C. 1357A2. So if you want to stop them under Terry v. Ohio, you need to have reasonable suspicion. If you want to arrest them, you need to have probable cause, and she says probable cause to believe that the non-citizen being arrested is likely to escape before a warrant can be obtained. This is the part which I struggle with a little bit. I struggle with this a little bit. And a lot of people may say things like Raphael is saying right now, reasonable is subjective. You walked right into my trap, Raphael. Right into my trap. But is it? Is it that subjective? What does reasonable suspicion mean? Because over here, this yardstick she's referring to is reasonable suspicion. And over here, that's for conducting a stop. And over here, we're talking about effecting a warrantless arrest. That is probable cause. These are two different things. two different things, and I'd like to spend a few moments highlighting the distinction between reasonable suspicion and probable cause. And I did, and I'm telling you now, I'm not, I'm not aware of this because I've practiced in this district or any district this issue of this criminal defense, but I am aware of this because, well, I have I took the bar and I studied and I stumbled, and when I got curious enough about it, I started looking it up, and I came across a couple of videos which really help explain it fairly well. So I want to go through this with you as far as explaining reasonable suspicion from attorneys who do practice criminal defense law. Without further ado, this one comes courtesy of a gentleman. I want to do law offices. I want to do this one. Is this the one I want to do? All right, we'll do this one. Why not? This is in law offices of John Gidry, PA.
Probable cause and reasonable suspicion, they've caused many law students to fail criminal law, and they're not even lawyers now because they just couldn't get this. I'm going to boil it down for you free of charge. I want you to consider the backdrop for our discussion today as a simple idea. What gives the cops the right to interrupt your day? Because we're all busy, we all have things to do. Being stopped by the police is never a happy thing. Even if I deserve it, like I deserve it for speeding all the time, I'm rolling stop signs. I get that. I'm not a perfect driver, but that's what we're talking about today. Why do they get to stop somebody? You know, this is America.
All right,
cops cannot pull you over because they just feel like it. They have to have an articulable reason to do it. And we call those reasons reasonable suspicion, probable cause, or a warrant. And we're not even covering warrants today, but we're just covering the other stuff. So the weakest excuse a cop's going to have to pull you over or stop you on the street is what we call reasonable suspicion that you've committed a crime. It's a very low level of information that they have to have that they're suspecting a crime has been or will be committed. They don't need solid evidence for this. But it does have to be more than a hunch, does have to be more than a gut feeling. If all an officer has is,
and the key is reasonably articulable.
Reasonable suspicion, they do get to stop you, but they can't search your car. They can't arrest you. There's some things they can't do, right? Now, I would like to run through a couple of real life examples. Our first one is pretty basic. Let's say that your wife suspects you of cheating. Now, some women out there believe that the very fact that we are men is going to provide you a base level, a constant level of reasonable suspicion of shenanigans. Naturally, I disagree. Stay with me here. In legal terms, what would be reasonable suspicion that you're cheating? Aside from the fact that you're a man. Let's get a little beyond that, even though I would say there's some must-see TV on this very issue. Eddie Murphy's classic Raw, check that out. So, to get your wife to a level of reasonable suspicion that cheating is afoot, let's say she spots you on your phone, you're texting late at night, and then you quickly hide it as she approaches. You're hiding your phone and doing all these things. That is reasonable suspicion, but it isn't proof that you're cheating. After all, you could be hiding that surprise all-inclusive trip to Sandals, or you could be hiding the fact that you just got that new bow for that new Lexus you're going to have parked outside. You're going to surprise her with it. You've seen the commercials with the big bows. So you might be hiding something good, but still, she's got a reasonable suspicion, but she's got no hard evidence that you're up to no good. Now, for a legal example of reasonable suspicion, let's take an officer sees a guy stumbling out of a bar, getting into his car, drives off swerving all over the road, right? At this point, the officer does have a reasonable suspicion that this guy is driving under the influence and gets to stop the person to investigate further. But at that point,
So that yardstick, you see the guy swerving all over the road, that now is reasonable suspicion. After you got out of a bar, come out of a bar, you're swerving all over the road. Now I have reasons to suspect that you're driving drunk. There's another video that I think is a little bit better as far as breaking down, really for police officers, how to assess when you have reasonable suspicion. Let me pull that up over here. This was done by Tactical Attorney. I'm going to put links to this in the description and give credit to these gentlemen here.
Where they have something to now.
So this is Tactical Attorney. He's a prosecutor explaining what reasonable suspicion is.
The Tactical In-Service Podcast, a podcast for law enforcement. In this podcast, I discuss legal strategies and topics to help you stay up on the law. In this very first episode 1, I'm going to get back to the basics. I'm going to talk a little bit about reasonable suspicion today. Why reasonable suspicion? Well, as a prosecutor, one of the most common issues that I dealt with was suppression motions, where the issue was, did reasonable suspicion exist to support the traffic stop or the detention? In the civil field, it's a very common attack from plaintiff's counsel, and it's a very common issue in Section 1983 liability cases. So very important stuff to know.
Well, just a sec. K-Val, there's no cookies. There's no Kool-Aid. It's 18 months. I would have thought K-Val was here for I don't know, 6. 18 months. God bless you, brother. God bless you indeed. It's good to see you, my friend. Yeah, you are well aware of the fact that even though you've been a follower for 18 months, there's no Kool-Aid, there's no spaceships, there's no tracksuits that are mandatory, there's no running shoes. But we appreciate the contributions that you have made to the following. The following is greatly enriched, courtesy of individuals like Cave Bell, like so many of you who don't just pop in and out, but stick it out. Stick it out! Stick it out! Month by month. God bless you, brother. Yes, but he's also well aware of the fact that tracksuits are optional, recommended, not mandatory, because it's not at all a cult. Type of cult.
Even though it seems pretty straightforward with reasonable suspicion, this is something that you use as an officer in your daily job all the time. It's actually very complex. And what I'm going to talk about a little bit here today, I'm going to talk about some United States Supreme Court cases. The courts have not even really truly been able to define it. In fact, they refuse to, as they say, put it into a neat set of rules and guidelines because of the vagueness of reasonable suspicion and the way that our courts define it. It can create some confusion. So what I'm going to talk about today is something that I've put together as a prosecutor over years and years of doing suppression motions, researching the case law. It's kind of a 3-step guide, a methodology. Now, I don't expect you as an officer to be out on patrol and kind of check 1, check 2. This is more of what I preach about. Every battle is won before it's fought, meaning that you have to be prepared for these situations mentally. And this is a methodology that you can use as you approach any situation that you get into. So I'm going to give you that today in this episode. But before I get started, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. This is a brand new podcast. This is episode 1. And one of the things that I really want to do with this podcast is whenever a new case comes out, a United States Supreme Court case, a big federal court of appeals case for my New Mexico officers, New Mexico Supreme Court or Court of Appeals decisions, I'm going to break it down. And I'm going to get on here and I'm going to do an episode on it so I can give you everything you need to know about that case. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast on whatever app you use to listen to podcasts, and also subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube to the YouTube channel so you get the notifications when a new episode comes out. Let's dive right into this reasonable suspicion stuff. Okay, so if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see I got a PowerPoint up on the screen here. I'm just going to walk through my 3-step approach and a little bit of background. If
people claim they hate PowerPoints, but I don't think it's true. I think people actually love them. Okay? PowerPoints are cool. I can say it. PowerPoints are cool. And it's so popular. Everyone loves saying, PowerPoint. No, you know what? It helps me clarify things in ways that are easily digestible to our empty little brains.
If you're listening on the podcast and you want to see the PowerPoint, just jump over to the YouTube channel, Tactical Attorney. It'll be there. You can also go to my website, tacticalattorney.com, to get all these resources for free. So, okay, let's talk about reasonable suspicion. Essentially, we're going to jump right into where it all kind of started, which is Terry v. Ohio. So let's kind of get into the basics of what we're talking about here. What I'm talking about here is the investigatory stop. Okay, so this is your typical patrol officer turning the lights on, making a traffic stop. Or if you see, someone walking down the road that's potentially engaged in activity, turning on the lights, stopping them. It's a detention. Under a detention, the Fourth Amendment applies, and you know that you need to have a warrant or an exception to the warrant requirement. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about reasonable suspicion, an exception to the warrant requirement. What Terry versus Ohio tells us is that these investigatory stops occur when an officer briefly detains and investigates a person based on reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Okay, so, what are the courts talking about here? How do you define reasonable suspicion? And what we find from the courts is we get tests and we get factors to look at, but the courts have admitted that it's difficult to define. In fact, in a famous United States Supreme Court case, Ornelas versus United States, the site's 517 U.S. 690 from 1996, the courts come out and say it. They say articulating precisely what reasonable suspicion and probable cause mean is not possible.
Whoa. It's not possible? Yeah.
What? Really? Yeah. So instead, what the case law tells us, and this is important for you to understand, is that you have to focus on the big picture. Okay, what do I mean by the big picture? I'm talking about what the courts tell us is that totality of circumstances thing that they're always mentioning in cases. So when you hear the courts say you need to focus on the totality of circumstances, what they're talking about is they want you to put everything together and create a big picture analysis. That's why they say it's difficult to frame this in terms of some neat set of rules, because they want to look at the big picture. The courts that told us, going back to United States versus Cortez, I'm not going back to it, but this is a case you're going to want to be familiar with, a Supreme Court case, United States versus Cortez, 449 U.S. 4. Somebody, they use terms like, and you've heard this before, articulable reasons, founded suspicion. And
you need to be able to say, I saw her on her phone texting and then hiding her phone when I came there. See, that's where you get to reasonable suspicion. That's in using Guidry's example of, suspecting a spouse of cheating on you. You sort of need to be able to not just say, I got that gut feeling. You need to be able to say, look, this is what I saw. That's when you get to reasonable suspicion. It has to be that these are all indicia of things that I can spell out for you, that these are the sort of behaviors that imply that the person is committing a crime.
They say these are not self-defining, and they're not going to provide clear guidance on what this means. It just depends on the situation. Instead, the courts tell us, and this is big, that the essence of all that's been written in all the case law is this: totality of the circumstances. What is the big picture? And that's what you must take into account. So you don't need to get necessarily tied up with these fancy legal terms. What you need to take from all the case law combined is that there really is no neat definition. It's what's the big picture tell you. Okay, so what do the courts focus on when they're looking to create that big picture? Well, there's three specific things that they're looking for. First of all, they're looking for specific facts, not vague things. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. Not the defendant was behaving in a suspicious manner. That's a conclusion.
Way.
You need to be specific on the facts, okay? And when then they bring up this articulable facts, you hear that a lot when you hear a discussion on Terry versus Ohio. What do they mean by that? Well, they just mean facts that you can articulate. They don't want to hear conclusions like, again, suspicious activity. They want you to articulate what facts tell you that this is suspicious activity. And they also mention, and this is a big one, and this is where we kind of get into the transitioning into making the final decision here, is rational inferences. Okay, what am I talking about with rational inferences? Once you see the facts and you articulate the specific facts, what can you as an officer infer from those facts? Can you infer reasonably that this is criminal activity? And there's a little bit more that goes into that, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Eric's Guide to Reasonable Suspicion, as I've called this, it's not an official guide. It's not used by the Supreme Court. This is something that I came up with throughout my years of being a prosecutor, in looking at all the case law and saying what common things are there. And I found that this is a methodology that you can use as an officer to determine whether or not you have reasonable suspicion. So it's one of those things that it's a mental
That is very
checklist
harsh. That is
that
very
helps prepare
harsh.
you for any situation you get into. So, all right.
Uzelian said, I saw this Uzelian when I started. Joe, if you get appointed judge, can you rush Uncle Runkles and Auntie Runkles' green card into the U.S. to save them from Canada? Oh, poor Canada. Oh, my God. They're never going to be saved. In messianic times, they'll be saved. But short of that, no.
Step one, you need to ask yourself, what crime do I see? And when you ask that question, what crime do you see happening right now? What crime is about to happen? What crime has been committed? So specific, okay? What crime do I see? And you need to be specific. If it's a burglary,
Well, we
you say
hear,
burglary. If it's a drug
and bringing this back, I want to bring this back to our immigration situation. What crime do I see? The crime is being an illegal alien. That would be the crime in who's in our territory. So I assume that would be sufficient. That would be the crime.
deal, you talk about a drug transaction. You have to be very specific here. Remember, when we're creating this big picture analysis, the court wants to see specific, articulable facts. So you need to identify specific.
I'll tell you right now, I didn't put into the I didn't put into a goal. I'm going to put a goal up now. I'm going to put a goal up right now that I will have a locals after show if I manage to get. This is what we'll do. I'll make it easy. Okay, I'm gonna make it really easy. We're gonna roll out the super chat, but it's got to be. We're gonna have to do this fast. Okay, in the next hour, if I get $55 chats, this way everyone can contribute. I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna have a locals after show. I should have done this at the beginning, but we can do this. We totally can do this. We'll try this out. Locals after show. Don't do it yet, because we're going to lose track. Locals after show. Watching the Trump interview. We'll try it out. We're trying something new today. It's a brand new type of show. There you go. There you go. All right. Oh my God. Bella Stella hit me with 20. I saw that while I was busy. 20 new followers. God bless you, Bella Stella, Queen of Recruitment. You're awesome. Following people brought in here. I got to do this fast because I got to move along. We got stuff to cover. Following 20 people. Oh, gratitude to Queen of Recruitment, Bella Stella, for bringing them into the following. That includes Spuds, Let's Go Brandon, Champs, JL Dubs, Oh My, Zero FUX. There you go, brother. Clayton Tower, Dumb Beard, Kevin Murphy, Mama Pillow, Audra, Governor Dog, Devin McLevy, Adam K, James FY in here. Okay. Molly Brown, Jonathan Spreewell, Ricky Bobby, Kobe Tiger, and Haley P. Haley P, who's one of my silent contributors. And God bless her for that. What I'll do is this. I'm going to count that. I'm going to count her 20. I'm going to count her 20 gifts just because I appreciate that. Just to get us open. I'm not going to do this for other. I'm going to count that. I'm going to count that as, what the hell? Let's count that as 20. I'm going to count that as 20 of them. So if I get to 30 of them, but I want it to be via super chat. Okay. Not by gifting. These 20 I'll count. Okay. Because Bella's awesome. And because, I don't want anyone to think I'm shortchanging, but if I get $35 super chats, I'll have the locals at the show. There you go.
Particularly the crime you see. Then you move to step two, where you ask yourself, what facts do I see to support step one? So what we're talking about here, like I've been saying, is you got to be specific. Okay, the court does not want to see, I saw defendant behaving in a suspicious manner. They want to hear the facts that tell you as an officer that this behavior is suspicious. Okay, so you be specific on the facts to support the crime that you've named in step 1. Finally, step 3, once you've identified the crime and you've identified the facts, you need to take a step back and say, is this more than a hunch? Now that sounds kind of vague, and it is. And it's one of those things where if you do a detailed analysis of step 1 and 2, it makes 3 a lot easier. And the courts, again, kind of give us a little guidance on what's a hunch and what's not. There's a couple things I'm going to talk about here in a minute that may help with that. But these are the 3 steps that you need to have down. Identify the crime, be specific with the crime, be specific with the facts that support it, then take a step back and say, is this more than a gut feeling, or can I make rational inferences that lead to the conclusion that there may be criminal activity afoot? I also think it's important to remember that the ends don't justify the means. You know, you can't.
And this is a key thing. You can't say, well, I found it, therefore I was right. You have to see it before you even stop them in the first place.
You make observations after you turn the lights on, after you make the detention. You can't say, oh, well, I found drugs, so therefore there was reasonable suspicion. No, it doesn't work that way. You need to have the crime identified, the facts, and the inferences before the lights go on. You don't get to use what you found to buff up the reasonable suspicion. It's got to exist before the lights turn on. And again, I can't mention this enough because as a prosecutor, one of the red flags that I saw that would always trigger emotion and would always come back to haunt the officer during the hearing, because he would get crossed on this, he or she would get crossed on this by the defense attorney, is things like, I responded in reference to a suspicious person call. I noticed the suspect was acting suspicious, or the suspect was crouched in a suspicious manner.
This is all crap. That's not going to help you.
Okay, what's wrong with these statements?
They're all conclusory.
Yeah, they're conclusions. Again, the court wants specific facts. So you need to list in your complaint, in your report, what the specific facts are that you saw that led you to believe the suspect was acting suspicious or crouched in a suspicious manner. You need to be detailed in those facts. It's very important. Okay, let's walk through a little example here of how this stuff kind of works in practice. So this is a case from New Mexico. Essentially, we have a concerned citizen who calls in the police department. It's actually like a neighborhood watch person that's always watching.
I think these examples are actually great because it gives us an idea as to where you need, what you need, and what is not enough. It's good for all of us to know our rights. So that's another reason why I whatchamacallit. I really like these examples. And then here's a couple examples, and then I'm gonna move on from it.
Looking out, and actually has like the patrol sergeant's cell phone, so it sends a text, says, hey, there's a car, it's in our neighborhood, it's around 11:30 at night, I don't recognize it, doesn't look like it belongs here, it's been sitting out there for like 30 minutes and it looks suspicious. And the officers know that there had been burglaries recently in the area. None at that house, none maybe in the houses that are close, just recently in that area. Generally speaking, there had been some burglaries, none that night, maybe not even none the night before, but recently in the area. So patrol officer sends a vehicle out and a unit out. The unit sees the vehicle. There it is. Matches the description. It's parked on the side of the road, right where the caller said it was. I should mention, no violation. It's not a parking violation.
They're just sitting
and
there
other than what
30 minutes.
The caller had said, there's nothing illegal about how the car's parked there. So there's a driver and there's a passenger. Do you have reasonable suspicion to turn the lights on and conduct a traffic stop? Walk through the steps. We're going to take it a step further too, because it was actually the passenger that was the defendant in this case. So do you have reasonable suspicion to support detention of the passenger? So let's walk through it. Step 1, what crime do you see? Okay, you can see now why I'm specific with these steps, because you get a call for suspicious activity, burglaries in the area. You just kind of come out there, oh, well, there's the vehicle, I'm going to turn my lights on. But when you get in court, you need to be able to explain this stuff. So what crime do you see? Well, the car's parked there illegally. There's nothing illegal about that. If you had to think about it and you got to pick something, what are you going to pick? You're going to say, well, maybe they're casing a house for a burglary, like the Terry v. Ohio case. That's probably the best you can go with at that point, right? Okay, what facts do you have to support it? Well, okay, it's 11:30 at night. They've been parked on the side of the road for 30 minutes, and there have been burglaries in that area. Okay, so you've identified a crime. You have identified some facts, but let's go to step 3. Is this more than a hunch? Okay, this is where it becomes a little tricky. You need to go back and you need to look at your facts, and you need to look at some rational inferences. Can you really infer from the fact that a vehicle's parked on the side of the road, well, there was nothing illegal about doing that, that they're engaged in possibly about to commit a burglary on those facts alone? Probably not. You're right to be thinking that probably not. And of course, our courts in New Mexico told us in City of Roswell versus Hudson, 141 New Mexico 261, if you want to look the case up, that there was no reasonable suspicion to detain the passenger. They didn't address the driver because the driver wasn't arrested and charged with anything, so he didn't have a case. But probably the same would have applied here. Because what happens is the officer goes to the vehicle, talks to the driver. The driver says, I live here. Looks at the driver's license. It's not the address. So the officer says, well, what the heck? Why are you lying? And then he says, well, actually, the passenger lives here. So the officer goes to the passenger, demands that the passenger hand over his ID. Side note, what do you have to demand someone turn over their ID? Yeah, you need to have reasonable suspicion. The officer didn't. And the passenger refuses to turn over the ID, gets arrested.
This, what we just saw here, is like the foundation of every pissant guy walking around with video recording, who's basically trying to pick a fight with police officers just to say, I know my civil rights. Now, this is something that I've talked with a couple other attorneys about this. There's so many videos out there, if you go looking for them, of people who are basically, pedestrian owns cop or something like that, where a cop will be asking someone, and they're always around this reasonable suspicion yardstick, where the guy is just, acting a little shifty, but not really doing anything. And then the cop comes over and asks him for ID. And he's like, I'm not telling you. I'm not giving you my ID. What's your name? I'm not telling you. I'm not telling you. I know my rights. And they're video recording the entire thing. No. And they'll start cursing at the police officer. And the guy will be like, and then they'll call down a second cop. And they'll be like, all right, call down your supervisor. It's like, all right, you can do this the easy way or the hard way. You want to do this the hard way? Oh, okay, we'll do this the hard way. You've seen these videos. Right? Which the pedestrian is usually legally in the right. I happen to hate those people because I'm just like, this is not someone I want to be friends with, because this is someone, I think when I was talking to another lawyer about this, I think it was uncivil law. He's like, those people are all the like, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. It's like, they're sort of like, people come up to your face. I'm not touching you. And you're like, stop it. Quit it. Get out of my face. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching. And you're just like, you're just so friggin' annoying that you think like you're owning. It's like, I'm not touching you. That's what they're doing to the cops. That's what these pedestrians invariably are doing to the cops. And the cops basically, they're trying to like bait the cop into like crossing the threshold, and too often the cops end up falling for the bait. So yeah, are they technically right under the law? Yes, they are technically right under the law. Are they people who are like good human beings who are standing up for our rights? No, they're just trying to make us, they're trying to be an ass. And not even in a clever kind of way. It's just like, oh, look at this. I read Terry v. Ohio, and I saw a couple of videos on YouTube. So now I'm going to basically walk up and act like a grade A dick. And that's essentially what it is. That's what it is. And I'm like, I would never want to be friends with someone who's like that. Who's like, that's defining you. Like, ooh, aren't you so based? No, that's not based. You're kind of being a jerk for the sake of being a jerk, just so you could try and embarrass someone, is not based. That's desperately trying to call attention to yourself. Now, if you happen to be engaged in something for a reasonable purpose, a reasonable objective, and your rights are being curtailed, and you start standing up for your rights, that's based. It's when the person is specifically trying to be a D-bag and videoing it and for the purpose, and let me upload this so I can get 2 million views of me, like, embarrassing this cop. Those are the people I'm just like, you're a schmuck. I'm sorry. You're technically right under the law. I'm not going to argue about that. I recognize Terry v. Ohio also. but you're kind of a jerk. And it's like you win on the video and you lost at life. That's what I look at when I'm saying this. You won on the video and you're pretty much a loser at life. That's my personal opinion. Yeah. This has never been done with to any other administration errors, so why is it okay now? You're talking about the TROs. Well, let's talk about this TRO now. Let's talk about these TROs. Let's talk about that. And I was talking about this. I think you're asking a fair question. What there's one more example that we have in this video, and then I'm going to move on from this video.
Under City of Roswell's municipal
No,
order.
this was enough. This was enough. We'll stop there on this. Let's get into. And I want to thank Tactical Attorney here because I think he did a good job of just walking us through how the law operates, what steps we need. Now, when we look over at this order, we can get a better idea for exactly what we're talking about here with respect to what she decided. We'll bring it up here. Go page. This is United Farm Workers. We're not going through it. We're really going to focus on what the actual order is, not much about the underlying thought process that she has. The United Farm Workers, Oscar Morales and Cisneros, et cetera, when they make me a judge, you think I'll be able to say Walter Munguia Esquivel, Yolanda Aguilera Martinez, et cetera. Will I be able to do that and knock off 3,000 people at a time? I don't know. Probably not. I'll probably have to break my teeth over all these names. Maria Guadalupe Hernandez. So the et cetera is not going to work. They don't let judges get away with et cetera. Fairly certain. When I come down here, we're going to skip past all this whole thing here. Basically, what we're dealing with is Operation Return to Sender is get rid of these folks. Get rid of these illegal aliens. Gotta love the name. You have to love the name. We get down to her reasoning here. She breaks down as far as plaintiffs here seek to enjoin Border Patrol agents from conducting detentive stops in this district unless there's reasonable suspicion, and enjoin Border Patrol agents CBP from affecting warrantless arrests in this district unless there's probable cause that the non-citizen being arrested is likely to escape before a warrant can be obtained as required by 8 USC 1357A2, and basically secure their rights under the immigration clause. And she says likelihood of success. She finds that there's a likelihood of success in the merits. That the Fourth Amendment says the right of people to be secure in their persons against unreasonable search and seizure shall not be violated. No warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. And that's basic Fourth Amendment stuff. A person is seized when an officer, by means of physical force to show authority, terminates or restrains his freedom of movement. And such a reason, a person will believe that he was not free to leave. And the Supreme Court said that you need to have taken into account all the circumstances that your liberty is restrained when you encounter police contact, and the police conduct would have communicated to a reasonable person that he was not at liberty to ignore the police presence and go about his business. We cite Terry v. Ohio for reasonable suspicion for engaging in a traffic stop. So you need to have reasonable suspicion if you're going to stop someone and say, I think you're an illegal alien. Now, to be fair, that makes sense. Because again, if we're looking at this just to make sure that awesome people like Lily Smith, I don't know how dark her skin is. Maybe it's lily white. Maybe she has dark brown skin. I don't really care what color her skin is, but I don't want someone to mistake Lily Smith for an illegal alien, who I assume she's an American citizen, just based on the fact that she's been a member here for 32 months and nothing else. But awesome people like Lily Smith here, who frequently invokes the horn, I don't want her to face a traffic stop or so get and have a stop and be detained under a thought that maybe because she might have dark skin, that she's an illegal alien. You need to have more than that to conduct an illegal stop. There has to be some sort of suspicion. And even if she's speaking Spanish, that would not be enough for based on what we just saw here. Totality of circumstances. Dark-skinned person talking Spanish, that is not reasonable suspicion that that's an illegal alien, obviously, right? You're going to need more than that. Now, that's the reasonable suspicion yardstick just to stop them. What if we want to arrest them? Then we're saying that you need to have probable cause to arrest them for breaking the federal law, being here illegally. So you need to have probable cause for that. I heard the judge released the Hamas protester leader from the college. Is this true? I thought they revoked his visa. I actually didn't follow up on that. You're talking about Mahmoud Khalil? Did he? Is there news of Mahmoud Khalil? I don't think it's been released. I think what I'm seeing here is that he can fight the wrongful detention case in federal court, according to a judge. That's not released. But, yeah. So that would be a reason why it's in order to protect American citizens. That's the reason why from being wrongfully stopped. That's why you want Terryville, Ohio to apply to even someone who's potentially an illegal alien. And then before you arrest them, we want to know that they've gone from reasonable suspicion to probable cause. This all makes sense. This makes sense. We might not like it, but it makes sense. And it makes sense really to protect you and me more than to protect the illegal alien. That at least we know we have someone who actually is an illegal alien. To me, that makes sense. And I understand it's burdensome. I understand it's difficult. I understand it's a pain in the neck. I understand you might need a lot more police. I get that. But at the same time, this does make sense. I can't deny that. And I understand we all want results. We all want these 12 million people out of here. I'm willing to abandon this career that I'm doing here and become an administrative judge and kick out and sign off to kick out hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens. I'll do it. And I mean it sincerely. I will do it. I will do it. Okay? You give me the job, I will do it. But it still has to be done within the confines of the Constitution. And it's not because I have a deep level of respect for the constitutional rights of the illegal alien. It's because I respect your constitutional rights and my own and my friends and family's constitutional rights that we have as Americans. And I want to know that this person here is not an American citizen. Now, as soon as I find out that this person is not an American citizen, yeah, I'm very happy to GTFO. Because you're breaking the law. You're not allowed to be here. I don't care if you're from MS-13. I don't care if you're an MS-13 gang member, or your name is Miss 13, or you're Mr. Magoo or Mr. Manuel Maguna. I don't care. That's not about what you've done or what crimes or how dangerous you are. It's your illegal alien. Get the hell out. It's simple. It's really that simple. But you need to get to that. That's what I think is appropriate. Now, what she put here, first and foremost, and that's why I think what I'm saying here is a little bit of a hot take. When she puts in her order, I don't think her order is really that terrible. I really don't. And I know some of you might be upset with me for this because the order purports to stand in the way of Trump's return to sender. I don't think it's that terrible. You can convince me otherwise. I'm just telling you, based on what we know about reasonable suspicion and probable cause and the rights for the police to stop someone, And based on just fundamentally and philosophically, I want to make sure that those rights are not going to be stepping on the individual who is an American citizen. And from a legal perspective, even if they're not an American citizen, they're entitled to that level of due process under the Constitution. I have a philosophical basis where I hate the idea of civil liberties for anyone who's not an American citizen. Even if they're a green card holder, I don't care. They still shouldn't be having the same civil liberties as you or me. That's philosophically. Legally, they do have the same level of rights as you and me. Or at least they have similar. I shouldn't say, withdrawn. Strike that. I didn't say that. No, let's go back in time 20 seconds because I'm not saying that. Legally, they do have some level of civil liberties. When it comes to philosophically, I think it makes sense to say that when it comes to due process, to ensure that it's not Andrew Branca, who's, when he gets a good tan, being mistaken for being some border crosser, I think it makes sense to say that we need to ensure we have the right guy, that's someone who's here illegally. I think that makes sense. Are you going to yell at me? Fighting kill normal. Saving our nation requires suspending habeas corpus. Not the first time we're a nation under invasion. I'll let you come in here, make your pitch if you want to. It's not going to be a long show. I'm not going to be here very long. If you want to make your pitch to suspend habeas corpus, okay. You can make your pitch. I'm sure you'll get tons of applause for it. I'm sure my audience will love you for it. I'm very hesitant before I say start suspending habeas corpus. You want to do that? You want to make the claim that we should do that? I could be convinced. So sell me on it. Sell me on it, Andrew. Here's the link. I'll also help you pitch your Michigan v. Sure case for the people who are interested in that case. I sent you the link if you want to pop in here. If you want to pop on in. Crossing the southern border or any border not in a point of entry is illegal, period. 100%. 100%. And that's why I was saying, when they make me a federal judge in charge of getting rid of these folks, when that happens, the first question I'll have is, are you an American citizen? No. Do you have a green card? No. Do you have a visa? No. Okay. Did you enter through a port of entry? Yes or no? Answer that question, no. Goodbye. I don't care what your problem is. I don't care if you're under threat in your own country. You're not a legal asylee. Adios, amigo. If you cross through a port of entry, then I'm going to say, okay, are you an asylee? No, go home. You're an asylee? Okay. How did you get to that port of entry? What country you're from? Colombia. How did you get there? Well, I walked. I took a bus, and then I came through Nicaragua, and then Honduras, and then I was in Mexico, and then I came across in Puerto Vallarta or whatever border crossing. I just made up that border. Is that a real place? I don't know. And I came across the border in Mexico. I'd say, all right, that's nice. I'm sorry you're an asylee. Hope things go better for you. But the most recent, you had to stop in the first safe harbor. And you didn't. You just kept coming until you got to America. You're not a valid asylee. If you came in and these are the steps I would start with as far as laying out. And anyone who, I think 98 out of 100 people, I think, would fail. Maybe some percentage who might make it as an legalized asylee, but I think most wouldn't. I think most would not. But well, I would if they are establishing it, I'd ask them for, and then I'd demand evidence, not just based on you told me that you come from Mexico, and that someone in Mexico is trying to kill you. Your family in Mexico is being hunted. I'd look for evidence of that. So, what did she say here? She wrote, plaintiff's motion for provisional class certification is granted. The first is the suspicionless stop class. All persons since January 6, 2025, who have been or will be subjected to detentive stops by Border Patrol in this district. And I greatly respect the fact that she wrote in this district. Meaning, if you were in the Southern District of California or the Northern District, or you were in Texas, or you were somewhere outside my district, because she's in the Eastern District of California, if you were in a different district, I am having no impact on you at all. So you were somewhere outside my district, because she's in the Eastern District of California. If you were in a different district, I am having no. There you go. There you go. Let me just run through this, and in that case, if there was no valid reasonable suspicion, she'd say that you're in this class, and if you were arrested without a warrant and there wasn't probable cause that you were a flight risk, in that case, you are in this class also, and all these people basically are whatchamacallit. And she appointed these people as being part of this class, and she said that Border Patrol is enjoined from conducting these detentive stops of anyone who doesn't meet those categories, which are all under the Constitution, which are all constitutional. And any Border Patrol who conducts a detentive stop shall, as soon as practicable, which is a reasonable way to word it, document the facts and circumstances surrounding the stop to establish that you meet the Terry standard. And documenters shall include specific, particularized facts that support the reasonable suspicion. This is all standard Terry v. Ohio stuff as we've been looking at, and include the date and time the agent completed the detentive stop. And if you make a warrantless arrest, in that case, you have to establish you have probable cause that this person is a flight risk.
For who?
What?
For who? For what? Who is eligible for Terry protection? Everybody in the world, or just American citizens? Is an illegal immigrant eligible for Terry protection? I would suggest not.
Okay,
I would suggest an illegal criminal alien has substantially less due process entitlement than an American citizen.
I definitely agree with you on that.
Okay, so I don't think an illegal criminal alien is entitled to probable cause. I think it's a completely different legal standard. I think it's a gross abuse of the rights of American citizens to pretend that anybody who breaks into our country is entitled to the same civil rights that we are.
So the point that I'm making about this TRO from this judge is, first and foremost, I respect the fact that she did not make it a nationwide injunction. She's not
not allowed to do that. That's beyond her authority.
I understand that. I agree with you.
You're giving her credit for something she's not allowed to do.
I'm giving her credit because, unfortunately, we've seen every other district court judge or the vast or seemingly a majority of them seem to think that they do have boundless jurisdiction, and she's at least recognizing her jurisdiction. That's a good step. I'm also giving her credit for the fact. That she at the very least followed the same yardsticks that would be applicable to an American citizen. And while I agree with you fundamentally that I think philosophically it's illogical to grant non-citizens similar civil liberties to what the same civil liberties that we have, the Supreme Court has said that they do get due process. You can see constitutionally,
due process is not the same for everybody, Joe.
I agree with you on that. Oh, whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I agree with you on that. I hit the wrong button. I agree with you on that. It's not the same for every person, but and that there are different classes. They're first and foremost, there are different classes, but they are entitled to some level of due process. So you tell me what would be due process? Do you agree with me that under the 14th Amendment there is some level of due process, even that's due to legal aliens?
Everybody is entitled to some level of due process, no question.
Okay, so we're starting with that foundation. Right. Now the next follow up to that is, what do we have case law that tells us what level of due process is applicable, statute or case law, that tells us what level of due process is appropriate for illegal aliens that would be lesser than compared to American citizens?
Yes, we have hundreds of years of case law and statutory law on this, because the Immigration Naturalization Act sets out the due process. Congress defines what due process is. for particular people in particular circumstances.
Right.
And Congress has defined that the Immigration and Nationalization Act takes the jurisdiction of these issues out of the federal district courts and assigns it to the administrative courts of the Article II executive branch. And it's left to the Article II executive branch to define whether or not someone is eligible for deportation. It's not up to the Article III judicial courts.
So you're saying that the fact that she's hearing
that is
this,
the due process they're entitled to. If the Article II executive branch says, we'd like to deport you, that is the due process to which you're entitled.
you have to at least establish that you have the right person.
Yes.
Which that would happen through the article. You're saying that would happen through the Article II administrative judge.
So anyone designated for deportation could say, I demand a habeas hearing before an Article III judge. I'm entitled to argue that I don't fall within the class of people to be deported. But it's a very simple process. It doesn't even involve a personal appearance in court. It's administrative. It's paperwork. For example, let's take the Alien Enemies Act. Does the government have good reason to believe this person is a member of TDA, is a citizen of Venezuela, is not a United States citizen, is over the age of 14? That can all be done administratively with paperwork, no personal appearance in court. And if the government can make that argument, they have good reason to believe that's the case, that person is deported under the Alien Enemies Act. That is the due process they are entitled to. Now, if you wanted to deport me, an American citizen, I would be entitled to a lot more due process. So the phrase due process is not the same for everybody. It's different for different people. And for people who fall within the scope of these deportation proceedings, either under the Alien Enemies Act or normal Section 8 immigration law, it's much reduced. It's very limited. If you're here on a student visa and you're advocating for terrorism or eradication of Western civilization, we can deport you. That's it. You're not entitled to a jury trial.
So, in that habeas petition, what would be the yardstick for them to defeat?
Do you meet the conditions for deportation as designated by the Article II executive branch?
What's the objective of a habeas petition compared to administrative judge? What's their role in a habeas petition?
The administrative judge is saying, we believe you fit these conditions. You're a member of TDA. You're not a U.S. citizen. Well, you can appeal those questions to the Article III judge. You can say, no, I am a U.S. citizen. I have a birth certificate. I have a passport. So I don't fall within these boundaries under which they're trying to deport me. But if you do fall within those boundaries, that Article III judge has nothing to say about your deportation.
Okay. But you're talking about under the Alien Enemies Act. Let's assume let's pick
or Article 8. It doesn't matter. You're here on a student visa and you advocate for the eradication of Western civilization. And Article 2 executive branch says, if you do that, we void your student visa, you're out of here. Article 3 has nothing to say about that. What they can question is, well, did they advocate for the eradication of a Western civilization? But if they did, then you're deported. Article 2 makes that choice.
Okay. So let's talk about this.
To be clear, what I'm saying is Article 2 sets the conditions. Article 3 legitimately can say, well, does this person really meet the conditions? But the conditions are set by Article 2. And if you meet the conditions, you are deported.
So what you're saying is that making a class of persons is in and of itself wrongful, because this is with respect to this operation return to sender, that creating a class of persons who are receiving, who have, let's say, have not been stopped or detained properly in accordance with Terry v. Ohio, that she's got no basis to even examine that, because you can't have a class of persons in this category.
So what I would say with regards to the class of persons is that you can't legitimately have a class of persons, because all these people have such individual circumstances under which they're present, under which the conditions of their presence, under which they were arrested or detained is so different that it cannot be a common class. It's not a shipload of people who all came here under the same circumstances. It's 100 million people whose circumstances are all different. They can't be a common class. Some of them came over the southern border. Some of them had asylum. Some of them have parents who are American. Some of them don't. Some of them have children here. Some of them don't. I mean, it's an infinite number of variable circumstances. That's not a class.
Let's put this into pragmatic effect. Let's actually walk through a typical example. Cop
like
walks down the street.
Like just trebuchet everybody back.
No, I'm just asking you like how you think this would work. Okay, let's assume let's assume that a cop is in a convenience store and here's two people talking Spanish. Now, and he assumes that they're illegal aliens. So what steps do you think that he would be entitled to take in that particular scenario?
Well, I think he has to have a reasonable suspicion that they're here unlawfully.
Right. So now if he arrests
them, speaking Spanish is not that.
Right. Okay. So if he doesn't have that reasonable suspicion, right? He doesn't have anything more than they're speaking Spanish, which I agree with you is not reasonable suspicion. Do you think that he's now, and he detains them by conducting an investigative stop? Do you think that he has now breached Terry v. Ohio?
I don't think the illegal migrants are entitled to Terry v. Ohio. So I don't think it's an applicable standard. They're not American citizens.
But you're saying reasonable suspicion. You have to have reasonable suspicion to stop these two Spanish-speaking people.
Because everyone's entitled to some due process.
Right. So now,
but
you're talking about once they're ready in our custody and we have them. I'm talking about getting them into our custody.
I'm saying, say he has a reliable informant that says this guy was just busted here in a van from Mexico. He's not an American citizen. From a reliable informant, he doesn't have probable cause, but he has reasonable suspicion to believe this person's an illegal immigrant unlawfully in the country. Okay. I don't think Terry v. Ohio applies. You need some minimal standard, right? There has to be more than nothing. You can't just have people walking around, grabbing people out of shopping malls and throwing them out of the country. You have to have something. I think reasonable suspicion is the reasonable something. It's very low, but it's more than zero.
Okay. All right. So that's not even arguing with anything I said. What I was basically saying is if you're going to arrest someone, we're going to stop someone. So you're saying you have to stop someone, you have to meet Terry v. Ohio standards.
But you were talking about this judge's decision. And what this judge ordered was that you cannot arrest people without a warrant unless you had probable cause. And probable cause and reasonable suspicion are two very different things.
100%. 100%.
So if this judge had said, I'm ordering that you can't arrest people unless you have reasonable suspicion they're here illegally, I would have said, well, that's what the statute already calls for. That's no change. But she didn't do that. She jumped it up from reasonable suspicion to probable cause. And that's a big jump.
She said for the arrest, you need to have probable cause.
Well, for the detention. But if you're not going to detain them, how are you going to deport them?
Well, okay, no. The first step is stopping them is reasonable suspicion. And then arresting them is probable cause. So my question is, now we're in this convenience store. These two people are speaking Spanish, and one of them, and when you try communicating with them, and basically you think that they're saying that they come from Honduras and that they cross the country, but you don't speak Spanish.
Say one of them actually in the convenience store is speaking to his buddy, and the officer, the ICE officer in plain clothes, happens to speak Mayan or Spanish or whatever. And he overhears him saying, yeah, I just smuggled myself over the border yesterday.
Right. Now that confession is arguably probable cause.
It's not a confession. He didn't say it to the officer. The officer just overheard it.
Okay.
But that's evidence for the officer to consider.
Right. Okay. I agree with you.
He doesn't have a warrant.
Well, so now that's the next step is as far as being a potential flight risk. So that's what she said, that you can't, that if you're not going to have a war, if you establish you have to have probable cause that they are a flight risk. And that's the part
Isn't everyone who illegally comes over the border inherently a flight risk? Wouldn't that be fair to say?
I can understand that perspective, but if they've established roots in the community, for example, they've been here for 10 years.
No, flight risk if they're going to be arrested. Not flight risk if they're just going about their day like they have been for 8 years. But if they know the cops are coming to enforce immigration laws, they're not a flight risk?
Oh, yeah, I would agree with you. They probably are.
Okay, so they're inherently a flight risk, Joe. It's kind of baked into the cake.
Yeah, I kind of questioned that also. I was like, let's deal with this practically. Like, how are you going to assume that this person is not going to flee if in fact they are an illegal alien?
Of course, they're not going to flee if they're not under suspicion. They'll just go about their day. But if they know they're going to be subject to the actual law, they're not going to run. I don't believe that.
So when you're suggesting over here, and the comment that you gave earlier, which was this over here, Biden kill normal, save our nation requires suspending habeas corpus. So what and how would that play out in this context? Where do you think that habeas corpus is being wrongfully applied here?
So what I believe is that Biden broke the system. He imported so many alien enemies of America into the U.S. with the intention of fast tracking them to U.S. citizenship, that the normal system is broken. It's like if a burglar broke into your house. The normal rules don't apply anymore. The doors are not locked. There's an alien, there's an enemy in your home. You can't just say, I'm not going to RSVP you to my party.
Right.
This is not a normal circumstance. This is an aggressive alien enemy in your home. And unfortunately, when that happens at a low scale, you can kind of handle it at a low scale. When it happens at a large scale, you broke the rules. The box has been turned over, and now you need different rules to deal with it. I don't want that. I wish we didn't have to do this, but several times in American history, we've had to do this, suspend habeas corpus and just say, you know what? We're just going to start grabbing people and throwing them out of the country because there's no other way to save the nation. And that's what we're facing, especially with the rebellion of these federal courts that are putting up every possible barrier for us to deport people we know damn well, and they know damn well, are here unlawfully.
Right.
How else are we going to live with 100 million illegal migrants in America and still be America? I mean, we can commit national suicide if we want, but I would prefer not to do that. And if I have to temporarily suspend habeas corpus to save America, unfortunately, I think we may be at that point.
So what you're saying is and habeas corpus would kick in if an individual would say, I was wrongfully taken here, and we can, in theory, have hundreds of thousands of people all making that claim. And then
millions, Joe, tens of millions at least.
So you're saying that you're going to suspend their right to actually assert that claim because of the gravity of the situation?
They can assert it from Venezuela. They can assert it from Mexico. They can assert it once they're out of the goddamn country. Let them file a claim. But first, they have to go.
And at what point so you're saying, at what point would you say that we would reinstate habeas corpus?
When we're down to a population of 240 million people. When we're down to a 1980 level of population.
That sounds a little bit harsh. But
you were alive in 1980. It was pretty good.
I was alive in 1980, but I'll tell you this much. I do
why did Lincoln suspend habeas corpus?
Well, there people would say that we were in actual war with battlefields.
An actual war. We are in a cold invasion war of the third world by 100 million people. We are at war. We're just pretending we're not.
How do you have that number 100? How do you have that number 100 million? That sounds.
I live in Colorado.
that still sounds highly inflated when you say 100 million.
Yeah, it's not. We'll find out. Every time I say that, people are like, "Oh, but we keep finding 10 million here, 10 million there." It doesn't matter. Let's pretend it's 50 million. Let's pretend it's 10 million. How many are we supposed to live with? How many foreign invaders are we supposed to live with? Isn't one too many?
I'm down with you there. I don't know if you heard. I volunteered to become an administrative judge and to just get a big rubber stamp that says GTFO on it and just start stamping papers to remove people. I'm totally on board with doing everything I can to help.
So why would you limit yourself with habeas corpus for people who are illegal criminal migrants into America?
You make compelling arguments. You do. You do. I look and I think that this situation here is untenable, and I think it is.
So here's the problem. The problem is they've broken the normal system. The normal system works under normal circumstances, but they broke it. They imported so many criminal illegal migrants under various excuses that unless we can rapidly remove them, I mean, just as an example, let's pretend the illegals don't vote. We know they vote, but let's pretend they don't vote. They neglect the law about being allowed to be in the country, but they obey the law about voting. Let's pretend that's a thing. Their mere physical presence counts in the census. The Democrats have 20 to 30 congressional seats they would not have but for the 100 million illegal migrants that are in the country. That's why they fight so desperately to keep these criminals in the nation.
That's true.
If we could get these people out, the Democrats would cease to exist as a political party.
I mean, from a political perspective, all you need to do is basically say they're not counted as part of the census. You take them out of the census.
The Supreme Court already said, we will not allow you to do that. This has been heard by the Supreme Court. If they're present, they get counted for the census and for apportionment of congressmen.
Yeah,
so the only way to solve that is to not have them here, which means they have to trebuchet back to Venezuela or wherever they came from. Everybody must go home.
All right, I'll vote for you. Are you running anytime soon?
Oh my God, like I could get elected. Let's talk about women, Joe.
I forgot about that. Damn it. Oh, well. So how's your case going? Everyone should be, if you're not aware of who this is Andrew Branca, a good friend of mine, who I've streamed trials with, had him on here countless times, had the privilege of meeting him in real life. And
kosher pizza. It was great,
right.
Man. That was some of the best pizza I've ever had. And I'm a big critique of pizza.
I introduced him to kosher pizza, and right now you're in the middle of streaming. You switched out of the Karen Reed trial into a different trial, right?
Yeah, Christopher Shore. This is a cop a white cop who shot a black suspect.
Oh my gosh! Stop for a second. I'm embarrassed. I forgot to publicly applaud you and congratulate you on 200,000 subs. Good job. I need we're gonna give you the horn. There you go. You can't hear it, but everyone else can hear. I just gave you like the blasting horn. 200,000 subs, a massive accomplishment. So congratulations on that. But please, yeah.
That was a couple days ago, Joe. It's 212 now.
Wow. Wow. How are you jumping so fast? What do you attribute it to?
It's just
the algorithm gods.
It's a combination thing, but the only time you get big jumps is from the algorithm gods. They decide they want to share your content more broadly. I don't know. Listen, if I knew how to do it, I'd have 2 million.
That's true.
So.
That's probably true. So and God bless. I hope you get it. I hope you get to 2 million soon, because you certainly deserve it. What are you? So tell us about the what's Michigan v. Shore? Is that the case?
I cry every day, Joe. It's a case of a white cop who shot a non-compliant black suspect at a traffic stop. And to me, on the black letter of the law and the evidence, it looks like a lawful self-defense shooting every day of the week. There's always the human factor risk, right? Juries are dangerous and unpredictable creatures. You have kind of the racial element you have to worry about. But what makes me cry every day is that this poor police officer's legal defense team is so inept and so incapable and so bad at their job. Even though the prosecutor also sucks, this poor cop might get convicted not on the legal merits, but just because his legal team is a bunch of S-bags who don't know what their job is supposed to be. Their energy level is a 2 out of 10. They don't follow up on questions. They don't aggressively attack the positions of the prosecutor. I'm looking at this poor cop sitting there at this table thinking he's represented by competent counsel, plus the judge is a moron. And so you especially need good counsel when the judge is a moron. And this poor cop is sitting there every day thinking, I'm being adequately represented by my legal counsel. And he is absolutely not. They are cranking the handle, doing the absolute minimum they have to do. And the whole time, this guy doesn't know it, but they're putting him on the highway to a life in prison without possibility of early parole. This guy is getting effed by his legal team. And it makes me very, very sad. And it makes me angry. I won't lie about it. It makes me angry. I think any criminal defendant If this was Carmelo Anthony, who I think murdered Austin Metcalf, I would want him to have a zealous legal defense, well-financed, and have every opportunity to raise his legal defenses at trial. I think Carmelo Anthony killed somebody, murdered somebody, and should go to prison. But he should have the most zealous legal defense possible. And when I don't see people getting that, it makes me, I lose confidence in the system. I don't think it's a just conviction anymore. And I think that's what's happening to this cop in this case.
You give examples as to like the weakness. I mean, I besides low energy, but as far as failings by the defense counsel.
Yeah. So, for example, they'll question an expert in use of force, and they'll say, "So would you say, expert, that our client's use of force there was reasonable?" And the expert will say, "Yes." And then they'll like move on to some unrelated question, not like, and the expert's a cop, so they don't ask. So, if one of the officers you trained was in this situation, what would you expect them to do? Shoot the guy in the head. What if you were personally in this situation? What would you do yourself? I'd shoot that guy in the head. I mean, it's a kind of repetitive follow-up emphasis on the important points that you do, because the jury's hearing literally hours of testimony from experts, and most of it is boring as that. So if you don't highlight for them what's important, they don't know. The jury doesn't know. But this defense team, it's like they're reading these dry use of force policy manuals, and there's no highlighting and there's no contextualizing it to all the video there is of the shooting. So, for example, they could say, well, what would you do if someone grabbed a taser? Well, I would consider that a deadly force threat. They could pull up the video. Well, here's video of our client having his taser taken. Would that be a deadly force threat? And the guy would go, yeah, of course. But they're not doing any of that. And a jury is not going to buy a technical, dry legal argument when what they're dealing with is a dude who was shot in the back of the head, a black guy shot in the back of the head by a white officer. You need more than kind of a technical legal analysis of what happened.
Wow, that's awful. Yeah, and obviously you're right, because it's much less conclusory if you actually can like walk them through like the factors that that are drawing them there, and then highlighting it by actually giving them examples and starting up with hypothetical examples, and then setting up, walking to your actual scenario that you had there, and walking your expert step by step through it.
And everything the prosecution is saying is bullshit. But the prosecution is saying it with a lot of energy. Like they really believe it. Like they're shouting. Well, again, a jury doesn't know what the legal merits are. A jury is going to respond to the theater that's being presented to the jury. And the prosecution's like, we're outraged that this happened and blah, 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 blah. And technically, it's all nonsense. But then the defense gets up and they're like, well, isn't it true that the procedures for the department are blah, 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 blah? Oh, my God, you're going to railroad your client into prison because you can't tell a story.
Yeah, that's a shame. Go in there. Help them out.
Joe,
what? Jump in there. Jump in there. Just say, dude, I'm going to save your life. Okay. You're going to become my permanent bodyguard.
The whole opening statement by the defense, they sent in a woman. They sent in a woman. All right.
I was going to be like, what? A robot?
She read from her iPad, her whole opening statement. She was reading from her iPad. She wasn't looking at the jury. She hadn't memorized it. And I'm thinking, I know high school drama students who are going to be in a high school play who put more effort into memorizing their script than that broad put into memorizing her opening statement. When a man's risking life in prison, she should have done that whole thing. It's only half an hour with no notes, looking the jury in the eye, not looking down at a goddamn iPad, reciting things like someone else wrote it for her to say. It was contemptible. Okay, sorry. I'm a little energetic about it because I think it really is a miscarriage of justice, what's happening to this guy.
If you want to see more Branko ranting, you need to check out his live streams where he is covering this on a day-by-day basis. They're already I'm taking from what you said that they're already through with the case in chief and they're on the defense. I assume if they're putting defense expert
the state
witness.
has rested. The state rested this morning. So
And
now so we had 5 witnesses for the defense today. And all of them, by the way, were police officers. All of them were police officers. Normally, you'd expect the prosecutor to be presenting the police officers to testify. But the defense witnesses are all police officers. And half of them, the direct examination by the defense was so weak that the prosecution stood up and said, no questions. No questions. Wow. And, for folks who don't know, when the other side doesn't have any questions for your witnesses, that means your witnesses were worthless. And that means your witnesses did no harm to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Although in the Karen Reed case, the one time that I thought that it was a wise move, which the witness probably did do some level of harm just in stoking anger towards Karen Reed, was when the mother took the stand. And I was like, there's nothing you can say here other than, like, your deepest condolences. And I actually thought Alan Jackson was brilliant. That was one of the best. And he's had a lot of phenomenal moments, but one of my favorite moments from him was when he said, all I can offer Peggy, Margaret O'Keefe, is my deepest condolences. My deepest condolences.
That was brilliant of him, because an inferior lawyer would have simply said, I have no questions.
Yeah,
right.
But offering his condolences.
He didn't do that. He didn't do that. He stood up, got up to the lectern, didn't say I have no questions, said, I offer my sincere condolences for your loss, and I have no questions. It was brilliant. What I want to encourage people to do, people who have an interest in the art of advocacy, look at how Jackson is advocating for Karen Reed, who has a much more ambiguous defense case, than exists in the Christopher Shore case. Look at how he's advocating for his much more ambiguous client, and then just pop over and look at how the defense attorneys for Christopher Shore are advocating. They speak in a monotone. They have no energy. They have no passion for their client. They don't follow up on questions that are very important for their client. They don't dig deeper. They don't come from, because, Joe, if you question a witness and they give you an answer that's favorable to your client, you don't just leave it in a monotone. You say, no shit, really? Do you really mean that? If I were to ask you in another way, would you say the same thing? If this were happening to a different officer, would you say the same thing? If you personally were in a situation, would you do the same? Right? You pound it. You reinforce it time after time. And you set traps for people, right? Especially the other side's expert witness. You set traps for them. You lead them into things. And you say, you're really telling me that police should never pursue a suspect? Right? That's the kind of stuff that they had the opportunity to do, and they never did. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, holy crap. That guy sitting next to you is going to do life in prison without possibility of early release if you don't achieve an acquittal. And this is your best effort? It's like they all took Xanax, these lawyers, before they went to the courtroom.
It's very aggravating. It's very, very aggravating. Whew. Well, this is Andrew Branco. This is why we all love you. This is why we all love Andrew Branco. I will tell you that you're kind of selling me on the whole suspending habeas corpus. I don't know how, assuming he wanted to suspend the habeas corpus, how would he actually effectuate that? Let's say if he just snaps his fingers, he writes an EO, there's no more habeas corpus for it. What? If he says there's no more habeas corpus for anyone who's, let's say, referenced under the Alien Enemies Act, how? So then what happens? In that case,
what happened when Lincoln did it?
He just basically directed his folks, don't do it. I don't care if he's hailed to court, don't do it. You think he'll be impeached and convicted? You think they'll be impeached and convicted? They'll be impeached. Does that be impeached? You think he'll be convicted?
Impeachment and conviction is purely a political process, right? So if Trump loses control of the House, he's getting impeached. There's no question about that. If the Democrats have a 1-vote majority in the House, he's getting impeached.
Right.
If they get a 2/3 of the Senate, or they get enough of the Senate and the Rhino
Murkowski and
Republicans want to vote against
Collins.
him, right? Then he's out. Of course, impeachment is a political process. It's like getting elected. It's not a legal process. I mean, the Constitution makes it phrases it like that. It says high crimes and misdemeanors, but it doesn't define what they are. The House and the Senate can vote whatever they want. So sure, if Trump loses the House and loses enough of the Senate, he's out. That just like he got elected. That's just a political process. So he needs to not do that if he wants to stay in office.
Well, here's the thing, though. My question is, do you think that if he suspends habeas corpus, he's at risk that they'll manage to get 13 Republican senators to say that's a line too far for us?
I mean, when you talk about politicians, it's hard to say. They're so responsive to polls and stuff like that. Who knows how weak they are? I mean, listen, he's gotten basically his whole cabinet confirmed, right? I'm shocked that happened. I'm shocked the Democrats are not able to hold.
I'm not.
But if he was able to get his cabinet confirmed, I think that suggests that it's not going to be all that easy to just politically remove him.
Do you know how I think he got his cabinet confirmed? I think he gave them.
I hope
Rubio.
it's blackmail.
I think he gave them Rubio. I think he said, "You tell me who you want as Secretary of State. I'll give the highest cabinet position to the person you want. You give me Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth and the other ones."
Okay,
I think that's what he said to
Rubio?
Thune.
How's Rubio been working out?
Oh, Rubio's been great so far, but he is
all right.
No, I'm not saying it was a bad call, and I'm not hating on Rubio, although I will say that historically Rubio has been a hardcore neocon. He's been great during the first 100 days, and no complaints at all about Rubio during these first 100 days. Really spot on, amazing. But historically, he's someone who's very consistent with neocon positions, and I can see them saying that we want Rubio as Secretary of State, and then we'll give you your guys, that Pete Hegseth and Kash Patel and whoever else you ask for.
I'm not a fan of Rubio personally. I think he's a very wishy-washy guy. But there's a certain truth to putting the right person in the right job. Like, I would never have elected Rubio president, but it looks like Secretary of State might be the right fit for this guy. Better than the senator from Florida.
Perhaps. At least as long as
maybe that's part of the art of what Trump does.
I think he negotiated the deal here. I think he negotiated his appointment.
And he put the right person in the right job.
Yeah.
So unlike his first term, where he kind of took on a lot of baggage, he was like, "Oh, these people are all establishment; they must know what they're doing," and they all stabbed them in the back. This time he was like, I'm going to pick the people. I want to pick the most important people. I'm actually going to choose it. I'm not going to just accept people who used to be here in these jobs. I'm going to pick new people, and they're going to have to meet with me and explain to me why I should pick them. And that seems to be working out pretty well. I mean, not perfect. Listen, I'm not a fan of Pam. I'm not a fan of Pam Bondi. I'm not really a fan of Marco Rubio. But in their jobs, in the time frame we have to work with, they seem to be doing a pretty good job. I mean, nobody can turn these things around instantly, but I mean, you read today, right? Like 50% or 70% of the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is just quitting. I mean, oh my God, if only we could do that with the federal bench, that would be amazing. I mean, it's like a colon cleanse. We're just shitting out all the garbage from these departments. It's perfect. We don't even have to fire them. They're just flushing down the toilet.
I think this solution here might be better than your suspending habeas corpus. Because I do think suspending habeas corpus is inviting defector Republicans to join in convicting him on the impeachment. And by the way, and even getting some of the rhinos who are in the House, maybe even to impeach him sooner. So because they'll be like, he's appointing himself a king, he's suspended habeas corpus. We have to get rid. This is not an actual war like the Civil War, the way Lincoln was. They'll make that distinction right there. And they're going to basically, and I do think that he will be impeached relatively quickly. All you need is a handful of Republican House members, and in theory, you could see some defections from the Republicans. I think this suggestion here, I think is stronger.
So what is it? What's this?
The suggestion is Dershowitz says you don't have to spend habeas corpus. He said send the illegals to a country with U.S. embassy and Zoom call a trial.
Okay, so fair enough. I would encourage people to consider another viewpoint, which is Donald Trump once wrote a book, maybe Ghost wrote it, The Art of the Deal. Mm-hmm. If you haven't read it, and you care about politics in 2025, you're a retard, because the president wrote that book, okay? Or at least it reflects his view of how to do the art of the deal. And a lot of the art of the deal has to do with things like asking for more than you're willing to settle for. That's just basic negotiation tactic.
Yep.
And so when President Trump gets up there and says, you know what? I'm thinking this habeas shit, we don't need this. We'll just get rid of all this crap. And then you end up settling for half of that. Guess what he wanted all along? He wanted half of waiving habeas.
I've been saying
and he won. And he won. So a lot of this is political theater, and Trump, who is better at that in my lifetime? Reagan came close. I'm older than you, Joe, but I actually
I remember Reagan. I didn't vote for him. I remember him.
He was close to his ability to wield this kind of political theater. Nobody sends him. Well, Obama, but of course Obama was carried by the media. But nobody who the media hated by like 96% coverage was negative. Trump is a genius at this. I mean, oh my God, he's like Barnum and Bailey. It's unbelievable. Yeah. Every appearance he does is like a media appearance. The media that hates him cannot ignore.
They can't stay away. They can't stay away.
It's unbelievable. He can look at them in the face and say, "You are lying. You're a big stinky liar," and they have to sit there and take it. Did you see that ABC interview he just did? Where the guy said, "Do you have 100% trust in Hegseth?" And Trump looks at the guy and says, the ABC guy, and says, "That's an idiotic question. I don't have 100% confidence we're going to finish this interview." Oh my God. That's why I elected Trump. He punches people in the mouth. Metaphorically, of course.
I was hoping that when the guy said we will finish this interview, I was like, it would have been so awesome if he would have said, "We're done. Leave. Goodbye." Like right then and there.
The funniest thing would have if Trump had just like pulled a condom out of his pocket and thrown it in the guy's lap. That would have been the funniest thing. This is how we're going to finish this interview.
That's not the way he does it. He wouldn't do it that way. But I've been pointing out exactly what you pointed out, that his style has always been, I'm going to ask for something insane. Like, give me all of Panama. We're taking over the entire country of Panama, and then they'll give me control of the canal. And I won't have to sit there begging for
1,000% terrorists on the whole world. 1,000% terrorists. It'll be amazing, right? The accordion man's.
And then the idiots are like, he's wishy-washy. No, he's not wishy-washy. He knows how to get what he wants. It's not wishy-washy. You're just too stupid. You fell for it the same way the other idiots fell for it. That's all.
Who are the better negotiators? The American politicians who've been giving away trillions of American dollars to the third world. I mean, just look at the 4 years of President Joe Autopen Biden giving away trillions of dollars to all USAID, all these foreign entities. Of course they love him. They were getting trillions of American taxpayer dollars. All Joe wanted was 10% off the top. And now they don't like Trump. The prestige of America has fallen in the eyes of the world. Yeah, because you're not stealing our money anymore. We're stopping you from stealing our money. Of course you don't like us as much as you like the guy who is giving you our money.
Yeah. Kimmy Hunt, I apologize. I missed this super chat earlier, and that's why I'm going to read it out loud to sort of try and make up for it.
Can you say that 5 times fast, Joe? Kimmy Hunt? Might that end up sounding weird?
She's awesome. Kimmy Hunt is awesome. She really is. Thank you, Branka. Deportation isn't a punishment requiring the same due process as criminal or civil charge that might end in punishment. Yep, it's true. It's not at all the same thing.
By the way, I want to point out, because there's been cases on this, people are saying you have to have a judicial warrant to arrest these people. First of all, deportation is not a criminal offense. It's a civil offense. There is no criminal warrant. A criminal warrant does not exist in this context. If you're just being deported for civil purposes, there is no judicial warrant that can be issued. It's not applicable. It's a different world. It can only be an administrative warrant. And by the way, INS agents do not need a warrant to arrest someone they have a reasonable suspicion is here unlawfully. It's 8 USC 1357. Just look it up. They don't need a warrant if they have any reason to believe you're here unlawfully, and you might not report back, which is every illegal alien.
She was actually citing from 8 USC 1357 in her decision today, and And that is referencing over here powers of immigration officers and employees. Any officer, employee, service authorized under regulations prescribed by the AG with have power without warrant to interrogate any alien person believed to be an alien.
Where does it say probable cause, Joe?
Doesn't.
It doesn't.
And to arrest any alien who in his presence or view is entering or attempting to enter the U.S. in violation of law.
It's the next one you're looking at. It's the harboring is the one that applies mostly. If someone's coming across,
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. So, but if you look at A2, and this is what I think she was focusing on here.
It's A3 that applies to people already in the country.
Within a reasonable distance from the external boundary of the United States to board and search for aliens, any vessel within territorial waters, and within a distance of 25 miles from any such type of access.
They're in the U.S. They're not crossing a border. You're not catching them coming over the border, right? That's different than what we're dealing with in these cases. We're talking about people already in the U.S. So maybe it's not paragraph 3, maybe it's paragraph 4, but there's a separate paragraph for people who are already here. And it says you can arrest them in any building, anywhere, any building, anywhere, including a courthouse.
For any offense against the U.S., if the officer offense is committed in his presence, or for any felony cognizable, that's to make an arrest. I'm not sure. I'm not sure to make arrests for felonies which have been committed and which are cognizable. I don't think it's these type of felonies, though, are they?
No, it's not. I'll pull it up myself and find it for you.
So over here it says if he was reasonably believe the aliens so arresting.
Yeah, so it's Article 2. It's halfway through the paragraph.
Right. So arresting the United States in violation of any such law and is likely to escape before a warrant can be obtained for his arrest. But the alien arrested shall be taken without unnecessary delay for examination before an officer of the service having authority to examine aliens. So then the question is, does whether you're
what's the threshold of proof? Does it have to be beyond a reasonable doubt? Does it have to be beyond a preponderance of the evidence? Does it have to be probable cause, which is really preponderance of the evidence, right? Or is reasonable suspicion enough? No, I understand how probable cause is applied is not preponderance, but think about what probable cause really means. Just think about the words. It means probable, right? Probable means more likely than not, right? And I know in practice, we don't deal with it that way. We just pretend anything qualifies as probable cause. Or is it reasonable suspicion? What is the threshold of evidence you need to trigger this authority? It's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt, right? You would agree?
She interpreted it as probable cause.
Why? That's not in the statute. Why does she have the authority to determine that when it's not in the statute?
I think.
Do I have the authority to do that? Why did she have the authority to do that?
It was an 88-page decision that she call as far as on the probable cause element.
And I read it, but she just says that's the standard. She doesn't justify why.
She doesn't provide case law to establish the probable cause standard?
No. In other words, she's applying the standard that would be applied to an American citizen, which would be probable cause. But these are not American citizens.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. That's to just assume that it's the same level. But unless you have case law to say that it's a lower level, I think she would be going on a limb to say that to attach a lower level. There has to be case law to that.
We have 100+ years of case law saying that aliens don't get the same due process.
Doing that. I keep doing that. I'm sorry.
We have more than 100 years of case law saying.
People hear you. By the way, when I do that, people still hear you. It's just for a second.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah.
So we have more than 100 years of case law from the Supreme Court saying aliens do not get the same due process as citizens.
Yeah.
That's not new.
Right. Yeah. Well, but
so
saying they don't have the same level. I'd love to see a case on point which says that 1357A2 does not mean probable cause.
So what's the level for arrest of an American citizen? It's probable cause, right?
Right.
So what would be the next level down in our law, in our criminal law?
But can you assume? Can we just assume that it's a lower level? Or do you just say
we know it's a lower level because every federal court, including the Supreme Court, dealing with aliens, say aliens get a lower level of due process. They never say aliens get the same due process as American citizens. It's always lower. So what's the next level lower to probable cause?
I understand that that's the established that reasonable suspicion is the next level down. My question though is this, and there has to be case law on this. I can't believe that there's not case law that says that it's actually that level for the arrest is reasonable suspicion. I struggle. I can't believe that would not be the case.
Because the jurisdiction has been taken on immigration issues, has been taken away from the federal district courts. Until Trump was elected, these cases were not going to the federal district courts. And in the immigration courts, the standard was basically, does the federal government have good reason to believe? That's all, because this is entirely within the discretion. Immigration and foreign policy is entirely within the discretion of the Article 2 executive branch. So in normal times, before the federal courts went insane with TDS, this was all left to the immigration courts. And the immigration courts would listen to the government. The burden, by the way, it's less than reasonable suspicion because the burden is on the alien. So all the government had to do, like if you were declared a terrorist, all the government has to do is say, yeah, we think he's a terrorist. A scintilla of evidence was enough for that. And then the burden is on the alien to rebut that evidence by a preponderance.
It does seem like the cases I've seen her citing all are cases that deal with American aliens. And I agree with you that there's a lower threshold of due process that's due to an illegal alien 100%. I think that's philosophically proper. I think that's legally sound. Here's the thing. Remember when I was engaging in my ungag Trump suit, and I met with Ron Baruti, and I was talking to him, and he was talking about how political speech is the most protected speech. And the Supreme Court and every court has said forever that the most protected speech is political speech. That's true. But they've said it's the most protected speech, and yet in no way have they fleshed out how it's different from any other speech. So you might call it the most protected, but how does that manifest? What does that actually mean? How is it more protected than other speech?
Okay. Well, first of all, they lie because obviously they allow limitations on political speech, right? Like campaign finance contributions, right? That's really political speech, but they allow limitations on that. But normally, what they're doing,
the Hatch Act is also
well, right. We're going to allow limitations on commercial speech, marketing speech, for example. We won't let you make false claims in advertising. That's the distinction they're trying to make. But it's also true that there's differences in political speech between what American citizens are allowed to do. Like I can advocate for terrorism as an American citizen in America. But if I were a guest in America, an alien in America on a visa, and I advocate for terrorism, I'm deportable. I'm instantly deportable.
And I agree with you that there is, I think that, and this is part of the argument I was making with respect to Mahmoud Khalil, that the same way we can keep him out if in fact he is supporting terrorism through his speech.
He was a spokesperson for an agency that advocated for the eradication of Western civilization. That's all that's required. He is absolutely summarily deportable.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bother pulling documents up. You just have to trust me on this. But I can pull up the documents. He was the immigration code says if you're a spokesperson for an organization that advocates terrorism, you are summarily deportable, and he was incontestably.
Well, she cites, because I was pulling up this decision here. I was looking quickly while you were talking through different things that she was citing to try and see the foundation of where she was coming from here. So she cites over here a warrantless arrest without probable cause of flight risk in violation of 8 CFR 287.8 C22. And I actually pulled that up really quickly here. Where was that? I have that here. So this, in case you're wondering, is standards for enforcement activities this is by Border Patrol, right? This is government.
It says use of force, not deportation.
That's not. We're not at the right place yet. She said it's C. What she referred to it as C22. So if you look at C22, a warrant or arrest shall be obtained except when designated immigration officer has reason to believe the person is likely to escape before a warrant can be obtained.
What's the standard?
An arrest shall only be made when designated immigration officer has reason to believe that the person to be arrested has committed an offense.
What's reason to believe, Joe? What's that mean?
She's
Does that
actually
mean
citing,
beyond a reasonable doubt?
she's citing the wrong thing here, I think. I think the reason I think she's citing the wrong thing is because I think she's actually looking when we pulled open when I pulled open 8 U.S.C. 1357. I think she's citing from a different subsection, not subsection 2. I think I think this is applying to that felony case, which was under subsection 3. That I was like, oh, this is not what we're looking at here. Let me pull it.
Before we leave this, I mean, we'll go on to your thing, but before we leave this says reason to believe. That just means that an officer of immigration authority can say, I am applying my powers of reason to evidence before me to have a reasonable belief that this is true. It's not even preponderance. It's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just a reasonable belief is enough. That wouldn't be enough for you or me, but it's enough for an illegal in the country.
Right. Okay. You're saying reasonable belief is
a very low threshold.
Yeah, and she did say probable cause to believe that the person.
And that's a higher threshold.
That is definitely a higher threshold.
So reasonable belief, I would correlate that to reasonable
suspicion. I agree with you.
That's enough for a cop to stop you and say, hey, what are you doing here? But it's not enough for a cop to search your car or search your house, right? It's a higher threshold.
It's a reasonable suspicion the person is a flight. But that is different than saying they're an illegal alien, hence there's automatically a reasonable suspicion. It's a higher threshold than what you were saying earlier. Because before you were so like, hey, anyone who's an illegal alien is at the reasonable, you inherently have a reasonable suspicion that they're going to flee.
Well, no, if you have a reasonable belief they're an illegal alien, that triggers this authority by INS. But it can't just be he looks Mexican. That's not a reasonable belief they're illegal. There has to be some due process, but if you have a reason to believe they're here illegally, like you have a previously reliable informant tell you the guy, I mean, that's typical, right? In search warrant cases, that would be a reasonable belief.
Okay, this is what I'm getting at here. Just working within the procedures we have set up here and trying to accommodate that. An arrest shall be made only when the designated immigration officer has reason to believe the person to be arrested has committed an offense against the United States or is an illegal alien or is an alien illegally in the United States. So there you can have an arrest, but you still have to get a warrant of arrest unless you have a reason to believe that the person is likely to escape before a warrant can be obtained. Now, you're implying that once the person's an illegal alien, you already have this reason to believe that they're likely to escape. And what I'm saying is, the fact that they have 1 and 2 here, the fact that they put in this warrant thing rather than inherently assuming that the person is going to be a flight risk means that, to me, that we cannot draw a conclusion that just because you have a reasonable suspicion that they are an illegal alien, that automatically triggers this reasonable suspicion that they're a flight risk.
Who's the burden on? Who bears the burden here?
What
I would suggest is what happens is the immigration officer has reasonable belief this person's here unlawfully, and then that person has the opportunity to make the argument that, okay, I'm here unlawfully, but I've been here for 20 years. I have a business. I have a family. I have grandchildren going to school here. I'm not a flight risk. If you ask me to come to court, I'm going to show up to court. But it's their burden to make that case.
And I'm okay with that, but you still need to have but what I'm saying is you cannot rely on part A to obviate the necessity of part B. That's my point.
No, part B is their burden.
Yeah. But you have to get a warrant for their arrest unless you can establish as a reason to believe that the person is going to be a flight risk. You're implying to me that everyone who's an illegal alien is an automatic flight risk.
You pick them up under Part A, and then if they can make that argument, they get released unless you can get a warrant.
Right, but you can't pick them up in order to arrest them.
You pick them up under Part A, and then if they can meet their burden that you didn't meet the conditions of Part B, they get released unless you can get a warrant.
So you're saying
they get picked up and they get presented to a magistrate.
I look at picked up as being arrested already. You're saying
yes,
picked up as not arrested.
An arrest shall
go on.
An arrest under Part A They get arrested under Part A. They get presented to a magistrate. And then when they get presented to a magistrate, they get to argue, I'm not a flight risk. And then you can only keep them if you have a warrant.
So you're saying you should be able to take them to a magistrate
Yes.
and then say, can we put them under arrest now and hold them, or do we have to release them?
They're already under arrest, but can you keep them under arrest, or do we need a warrant to keep them under arrest? And they get to say, no, you need a warrant to keep me under arrest because I meet the conditions of paragraph B. So if they don't have a warrant, then you get kicked loose.
Okay, that really makes a little more sense to me.
Okay, well, that's because I'm a sensible guy. But that means the initial detention under A is legitimate. Okay. And the burden for B is on them to meet that burden.
Fine. But what I'm saying is, I don't know if you didn't express it properly, or I was improperly understanding you. I was understanding that you were basically implying that anyone who you now have reasonable suspicions of illegal alien, we don't need to worry about a warrant at all because they're automatically a flight risk. And what you're saying is there still should be a second step here under this regulation, which says that they have a chance to go before a magistrate judge and say, this guy is a crackpot, I'm not an illegal alien, and or I'm not a flight risk, and at least have a third party who's purportedly, presumably and purportedly neutral to weigh in there as to whether or not this person should stay under arrest.
Absolutely, 100%. If I haven't been clear, everybody is entitled to all the due process that the law allows to them. And if this is what the law allows, this is what they're entitled to. What I expect will happen in practice is that 99.9% of the people picked up by ICE will not qualify for any of this bullshit.
Oh, I agree with you.
So, but in case they might be, they're all entitled to the due process of being presented to a court and making this argument.
Well said, brother. Well said. I know you probably haven't. You have court. You have trial tomorrow, right? What time is that trial start for you?
Well, not really. I mean, I'm not there.
No, I know. Right. Because we actually have an off day in the Reed trial. Karen Reed is off tomorrow. I don't know why, but she just said we'll come back Friday. So that's why I was wondering if you. I assume you have trial. I assume the Michigan v. Shore case is going on tomorrow.
It's been and yeah, it is. It's starting at I guess 9 a.m. Eastern time, probably.
Oh, good golly!
It's been so boring.
Is it?
I mean, it's so sad, Joe. The guy, it was a lawful use of deadly force by this cop, and he's just getting railroaded, and it's so sad to watch. First of all, the prosecution also sucks, which is a gift to the defense. This is not. So remember Binger from the Rittenhouse prosecution.
Yeah,
Binger was a despicable human being, but he was not a bad prosecutor.
He was entertaining.
A smart lawyer.
Yeah.
He was a smart guy. He knew what he was doing. This prosecutor is inept, which should be a gift to the defense. But the defense is equally inept. It's unbelievable. I mean, so are you watching Karen Reed at all? Have you seen this Alan Jackson attorney for Karen Reed?
Of course. I've been streaming my own channel.
All right. I don't know, Joe. That's why I'm asking.
I joined you.
You see how much charisma and presence Alan Jackson has in court? Right.
He's
all right. So just imagine this poor cop in this Shore case. Imagine his legal defense team. You took all that charisma from Alan Jackson and you made it all negative. Every bit of it negative. That's how bad they suck. If Alan Jackson was a defense attorney for this officer, there's no question there wouldn't be an acquittal. He would destroy this prosecutor. But instead, we have this retard prosecutor present his retard theory, and this poor officer's defense team is even more retarded. And I find that professionally offensive.
I agree with you. And here's the thing. I when I covered the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, the prosecution, the skill of the U.S. district attorneys was just remarkable. I mean, so professional, so insightful, everything about the way they question, the way they structure their things, their passion. They were a phenomenal team of attorneys, and the defense was every bit as talented, and it makes the trial viewing so much more enjoyable. It's such a
like
different experience.
Michael Jordan in the Chicago Bulls in the playoff, right? I mean, that's
or the WNBA, right? I mean, It's like that's the difference. It's like which you're just like I can't. Oh my god. No. I saw a clip of I saw a clip which I shared with my audience, which was the WNBA explained in 12 seconds, and you see this chick standing out of bounds, and she bounces the ball to the wrong team who's standing.
I saw the video.
who's standing like not within 20 feet of any player on her team, just bounces to the wrong team. To the wrong team. The woman takes 2 dribbles, comes up, takes an easy jump shot, clang. That's the analogy that you just drew, and it's so much more painful to watch. You're just like, oh my god, why can't you be better at what you're doing? You're being paid for this. Oh my god, it is.
Today the most important. So the state is rested in this police officer case. So the defense is starting to present their witnesses. And by the way, every defense witness so far has basically been a cop. The defense witnesses are cops. All the cops are testifying in favor of the defendant. The prosecution did not call one police officer, not even the usual like high-ranking police chief who's there for political reasons. The prosecution called no. Their cops are from New Mexico and South Carolina, and this case is in Michigan. So the defense starts calling their police witnesses. They get their most important. Oh my God, this last witness, this captain from the Grand Rapids Police Department, the same department that the defendant is in, he's feeding them the answers. He's like, yeah, if only you would ask me if this was a lawful use of deadly force, I would say yes. I just need someone to ask me that question. Oh my God, he said that so many times. And this, I'm sorry, but it was a woman, defense attorney, would just say, so what's your favorite color? I'm like, oh my God, you're just going to skip over that? I mean, the guy just gave you everything, and you're just going to skip over that. And she did it time and again and again. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, not only shouldn't you skip over it, you should ask him, really? So you're saying that's the general policy. What about if a hypothetical reasonable person in your department, officer in your department did that? Would that be reasonable? Oh, yeah, it would. What about
even if you're shooting them in the back of the head? Even if you're shooting the back of the head?
Would that be reasonable? Yeah. What if it was you personally in that position?
Would you put a bullet in the back of that guy's brain in that position right there?
Could you hold up your hand in the position you would shoot that guy in the back of the head?
Exactly.
I mean, oh my God! Drive it home to the jury.
Think of how powerful that would be. That visual of what they'll all remember. That cop's holding his hand up there. I would have aimed my gun like this, pull the trigger, and watch his brains smatter all over my face. That's what I would have done there.
Can I approach the witness? Can we replicate this? We've all seen the video. Right. Can we replicate this? Can you get on my back
like it's a gun?
Right.
Hold this pen like it's a gun, and you hold it in my head, and you say at what point you would be pulling the trigger.
They could have done all that, and instead they get that answer. They ask him, "Would this be reasonable?" He says yes, and they're like, next question. What is your favorite color? I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. Your client is looking at life in prison, and you're giving all this away. This guy he gave you a gift. He gave you a gift, and you threw it fucking away because you're an idiot.
To be fair,
so
on defensive female attorneys everywhere, I will say that lead attorney for the prosecution in Ghislaine Maxwell case was Maureen Comey, and she was exceptional. I've seen a lot of phenomenal female litigators, but sometimes I will
jump in. I know excellent female attorneys. Andrea Burkhart, excellent female attorney. She's got her own YouTube channel. You should check it out, and you should subscribe to her channel.
Not during the Karen Reed trial, but yes, otherwise, yes. But sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I haven't watched her cover the Karen Reed trial.
No, she's phenomenal. She's phenomenal. She's great. I she's just in competition. That's all.
But just in general, most lawyers are mediocre or suck. Everybody's on a bell curve. Lawyers too. So like 80% of lawyers are kind of mediocre. 10% of them just suck, and 10% of them are world class. But I will suggest to you that if you're looking at life in prison without possibility of early release, You don't want the mediocre ones. You want one of those who's in the top 10%. And what this poor bastard has right now, Christopher Shore, is very low energy, mediocre, non-narrative telling defense attorneys. And this poor bastard might well get convicted, not because of the law and the evidence, but because the prosecutor likes to shout a lot and his defense attorney is low energy. And that's not a good reason, in my opinion, for someone to spend the rest of their life in prison.
Indeed. All right. I appreciate you stopping in here. If you have any other additional thoughts anything you think we missed on this whole thing?
No,
I don't want to keep you any longer. It was awesome hanging out with you. You brought fire today, and I think I'm glad you came in here, because I think I feel better about saying let's avoid suspending habeas corpus, but there are ways to there's always 9 ways to skin a cat, and I agree with you that the way things are going now, I mean, we're fighting for 100 days over getting rid of 500 people, and where we need to get rid of up to 100 million people.
100 million, right?
At the very least, like 20 million. Yeah. So
Joe, just imagine, just pretend that my number of 100 million is correct. Just imagine we got rid of 100 million people. What would, and in the meantime, we've been living with these people, right? So they've been consuming scarce American resources, right? Housing, education, medical, criminal justice, everything, right?
You wouldn't recognize the country. No one would recognize the country anymore.
Imagine what would happen. All you people who think that the rent in your neighborhood is too high, and you're probably right. Guess what? It's too high because you're competing for that apartment with 100 million illegal criminal migrants. If they were not here, you think what the rent would be? What would traffic be like? What would competition for entry-level jobs be like if we didn't have 100 million? What would the emergency room look like if we didn't have 100 million illegal criminal migrants in the country? You think you might be able to get medical attention like that? You think your health insurance costs might go down if you weren't paying not just for you, but for 100 million illegal migrants that your money is being taken from to pay for? Your entire life would change. What do you think about the competition for used cars would be if you weren't competing with 100 million illegal migrants? Your life would be profoundly improved if only we removed these invaders from our nation.
I'll tell you,
that's all we have to do.
I live in one of the densest cities in the country, not New York, different city now. I live in a city that's one of the densest cities in the country, which in downtown area, there's an immense Latino population. And I served on the planning board, and they told us that because people would come in there and they'd make applications to take their unit and subdivide it into 2 units or 3 units or 4 units. And they would make their applications, and we were directed that it was our duty to be mindful of the fact that there was a massive housing crisis. And there's a massive overpopulation crisis in our city, and we should be ever mindful of that when we're approving or rejecting any of these applications. And I took that to mean, a lot of people sitting on the planning board meant like, well, I guess we have to try and get these housing things approved. I took it to mean the exact opposite. I said, oh, we have an overpopulation crisis. That means if we subdivide a unit into 4 units or 3 units, now all of a sudden that's 3 new houses. And that means instead of having 9 people moved in there, you're going to have 30 people move in there. That's what's going to happen if we had fewer houses here. There'd be fewer people moving in, and we would have less fighting these places. That's what's making it so bad. I took for the exact opposite. It's because of the population crisis that I'm rejecting your application to subdivide, because you're just going to be bringing in more. It's breeding the problem rather than remediating or alleviating it.
So I did a murder case. I worked a murder case out of California. And the event occurred in a bedroom of a house, but the house was it's like a house I live in. Okay, so I live in a multi-bedroom house, but in California, they literally had an entire family living in every bedroom in that house. They would share the kitchen, but every bedroom, and I don't mean like a college kid. I mean a husband, a wife, children. An entire family was living in each of the 5 bedrooms of that house.
I know.
Oh my God! I mean, it sounds like communist East Berlin.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. But for those people in California, that was normal because they were probably paying $200,000 a year to live in that bedroom. To buy that house is probably $5 million in California. And that's what happens when they make the cost of living that high. They're doing it here in Colorado too. They just say, well,
when are you getting out of that commie state?
Next year, 1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're letting one of my daughters finish middle school here. She's been in the same school. We don't want to move her to another school for 1 year and then move her to high school. So we're letting her finish here.
Mm-hmm.
But they're doing this in Colorado. They passed a law that says you can't limit the number of adults who live in a household, which means now we're going to have, even in where I live, which is a nice neighborhood, any day now across the street, they can move 30 illegals into that house across the street and there'd be nothing I could do about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's out of control. It's really out of control. All right. I feel like I have a much better grip as to how we can address this crisis. I feel as if some of the solutions we came out here, specifically, I really love that Dershowitz idea of removing people, and that was brought to us courtesy of Anna Philbin, who none of you know this, but Anna Philbin is the very person who designed my layout that I have in the back out here and gave it to me gratis. So I whenever I see her name in the chat, I feel appreciative that she helped establish my branding and as a gift when she first saw me.
So just to close out, Joe, I would just encourage people to think about what the alternatives are, what the options are. Because the options are, we could just import 100 million legal migrants and stop being America, right? America is not magic soil. America is a consequence of the people who live here, who founded it and live here. It's a culture. And if you import, let's say, 100,000 people from Haiti, they don't magically become Americans when they get here. They're still Haitians. They bring their culture with them. The American soil does not turn them into John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and George Washington.
Johnny Appleseed.
That's not what happens, right? If you moved me to Italy, I'd still be American Andrew Branca, right? So when you import people, you're importing their culture too. Do we want to be Haiti? Do we want to be Venezuela? Do we want to be any of these nations? We're importing people by the millions. And if we don't want to be those people, we need not to be importing them. You can do it in small quantities where people can assimilate. But what you can't do is just bring in several tens of thousands, dump them in some Ohio town en masse, and expect those people to ever integrate into American society.
Well, and the way we did it traditionally, a lot of people talk about how America was built on immigrants. The reason that worked is because America was a melting pot. And the point
and there was no welfare state, Joe.
Yeah.
You didn't get paid for being here.
Yeah.
You in fact, work.
Yeah, and you had to also show an ability to support yourself. And that's part of the precursor for getting in here. Whatever is written on the statute.
When my family came here, when my Italian family came here, you had to show a sponsor. And the sponsor was responsible for you. You couldn't go on the public dole. Your sponsor had to pay if you went on the public dole. And all my Italian family, they went and they dug canals throughout New York State. I mean, they did hard physical labor to be here. They certainly weren't given welfare and housing and an EBT card and health care. I mean, Jesus Christ, that didn't exist.
The reason I bring up the melting pot is in context of what you were describing as far as retaining the American culture. The melting pot turned immigrants into becoming. It became something like your objective was to become an American. You came here from the old country in Europe, and your objective was that you wanted your children to be Americans and Americanized. That was a massive part of why people were coming to America.
But now it's coming here to get a payoff because you get free money and housing and healthcare and education. That wasn't the case.
And actually to reject any form of integration into our society and retaining your Haitian customs or whatever it is, and rejecting American culture, while at the same time sucking from the teat of American beneficence. So
I mean, I don't mean to make it personal, Joe, but you're an Orthodox Jewish individual. Yeah. I'm not sure what the right phraseology is, right?
No, Orthodox Jew.
But but you and your people, your tribe, right? You maintain a barrier between yourself and the rest of the world, right? You hold yourself to different standards than you would expect of the.
And that's on a cultural level, but we're still operating within this sphere of, you know, business wise, work wise, and things of that nature. We're still operating in that sphere and contributing to society. Really,
I understand, but shouldn't America? Why shouldn't America do the same thing?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't America say, if you want to enter our national borders, there are standards and behaviors and conduct that we expect of you?
Okay.
I mean, you do that in your community.
Yeah, 100%. And that's you're right, as being the host of the host of a home, is that you have the right to say when you're here that you're going to abide by certain standards.
But what the illegals want in America today is they want to be able to be here, like on student visas, right? We have hundreds of thousands of student visa people here, and they want to say, we want to be here on a student visa, and then we want to protest against the national security interests of America. Right? We want to say boycott Israel or whatever it is they want to talk about. But whatever it is, it's something different than the president, the Article 2 executive branch is saying, this is in our national interest. So they want to come here as aliens on a student visa and then protest against what America decides is its own national security interest. And then they're shocked when they get deported. I'm sorry, but if you're an American citizen, you get to do that. But if you're a guest, you don't get to come here pretending you're a 30-year-old college student on a student visa, and you're protesting against the national security interests of the U.S. If you do that, you get deported.
And that's what I talked about in the context of Mahmoud Khalil, that if you're a guest in someone's home, and that's very different than if you're the son or the grandchild of the homeowner, where you don't get to come into my home and piss on my couch. But if you're my 3-year-old grandson, you do. I might be upset about it. I might say, hey, cut it out, but I'm still not going to evict you. But if you're a guest in my home and you piss on my couch, I'll be like, get the hell out of here. And that's the difference between a citizen and someone who we're bringing in here.
It's a guest. It's a favor to them. They act like they're privileged and entitled to be here. They're not. It's a gift.
And that's why civil liberty standards are lower. That's exactly why and they always should be. And that's why I've said philosophically, they should be lower. It doesn't make sense to give them the same treatment. I kept this up here because I visited Estes Park when I was like a teenager. That area is beautiful. It's just a beautiful part of our country. It's a shame what Colorado has become. And I weep for you Coloradans, because it really has.
Colorado is like California now. So Estes Park is still beautiful. If you want to come visit Colorado, I would strongly encourage you to visit Estes Park. Like if you were to visit California, there's places in California I would tell you to visit. It's beautiful, but you can't live there. It's crazy.
Yeah. All right, everyone. I thank you all for joining me tomorrow. I expect to be back here, God willing, tomorrow evening. I thank you for joining me. You're awesome. I'm going to go through some Rumble rants. Where can people find you? Since you've done lawofselfdefense.com, and you can find him on YouTube, on Rumble. You're on Rumble?
Law of Self-Defense on YouTube, Law of Self-Defense on Rumble. There's nobody on Rumble, but yeah, sure. I mean, if you're one of the 5 people in Rumble, you can find me at Law of Self-Defense.
You'll be number 6.
Number 6.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Hey, Joe, thanks for having me.
Brother. It's always awesome hanging with you, brother.
All right, take care. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night. And that was pretty awesome. I'm really glad he stopped in here. Wow, I got big. I don't have a border anymore. I'm not used to being quite so big. I feel kind of like it. I'm kind of liking this without the border. Able to fill up your whole screen there. You have me on the big screen TV. My head is probably like 4 feet long. Anyhow, so yeah, I had a couple of Rumble rants I wanted to pull up here. Santiago Space Outlaw says, FYI, the only reason I wear a tracksuit is for those times you put on your lawyer hat. Well, thank you. RPP says, due process, quote, I declare all 3,000 you freeholdies illegally present, therefore criminally invaders to be immediately removed by force, your DNA fingerprint to be retained on file upon eviction. Afuera! Afuera! That was pretty funny. I should have pulled that up a long time ago. Sorry about that, RPP. I had the privilege of meeting RPP when I visited Cool Frog on Saturday night and was hanging out with him for a little bit, I did an interview with Cool Frog and we had an awesome time. We were laughing. I highly suggest you guys check out Cool Frog's channel in general, and that discussion in particular, where I stayed there for like 2.5 hours on Saturday night. We had a really good time hanging out there. So, what do you mean your rant's done for the night? We did good. I did good. We did good, Jay. Jay, did I do good? You're on YouTube. Why you don't even have rants? Unless you're talking about actual really ranting as opposed to rumble rants. Yeah. Estes, it's like festive, not Estes. Estes Park. Maybe. I'll defer. What's no? I got yours, Uzelian. Didn't I get yours? What's no? Oh, I did miss it. Uzelian. Oh my God. I did. I'm so glad I saw your no. I need to give you no horn. I apologize to you. I don't know how I missed that. I'm so glad I caught that. I would have felt like crap. Uzelian sent 50. I'm gonna give you another horn just for that. Just because I feel bad. I'm even gonna pull this. Oh, let's pull this up here. Make this big. Oh, I hope I didn't lose that. Oh my God, if I lost that, I'm gonna be really upset. Uzelian says here, isn't there a different burden for reasonable for civil than through criminal? When they say they need due process, we have to remember what is happening is similar to a traffic ticket. Both are civil, and you are 1,000% correct. 1,000% correct with this. That it is a different burden, and I'm really glad I brought in here. I thought I went up high enough. I hadn't. I was so glad you caught my attention with that. Oh my God, I would have felt awful. Yeah, you're 100% correct. It is a different burden. It is a civil thing. It's not considered criminal. And accordingly, it makes sense why we have a lower standard just on that basis alone. Just on that basis alone. Very insightful comment. Thank you, brother. Thank you very, very much. And you brought that up before Branca got in here. You're like, Uzelian's like, you don't need Branca. Just get me on up there, Joe. I'll set you right. I'll set you straight. I can't believe I almost missed that. My God, that would have been terrible. All right. Tomorrow there is no trial, at least with respect to Karen Reed. You can check out Michigan v. Shore. And we have this here, rumble.com is, I think that's the Cool Frog link. Those of you who are in Rumble, I highly recommend you check it out, because I don't think it was on YouTube. I'm not sure if it was on YouTube. It definitely was on Rumble. Anyway, that's my show. I'm sticking to it. It's already 1:15 in the morning here. So yeah, I will see you guys 10 p.m. God willing, 10 p.m. tomorrow. And I'm hoping to drop some vids. So look for that. Look for that, because that should be coming soon. Lab meat is for they, them. Definitely not for you. Don't eat the bugs. Just don't do it. Don't eat the bugs. Just don't. Just trust me. You don't want to. Don't eat the bugs. Good night, everyone. Godspeed.